when the sun began to rise. Tonight, as the world grows quieter and the last lights disappear from distant windows, imagine standing on a lonely stretch of English coastline sometime near the end of the 15th century. The wind carries the scent of salt and seaweed. Waves roll patiently against black rocks exactly as they have for thousands of years. Above, gulls drift effortlessly through the cold air, crying to one another across a gray sky. Behind you lies a kingdom that seems rather ordinary. Ahead lies an ocean that seems endless. Neither the fishermen mending their nets nor the merchants loading barrels onto small wooden ships could possibly imagine that this quiet island would one day govern nearly a quarter of humanity. They could not picture cities thousands of miles away flying the same flag. They could not imagine maps where enormous portions of the globe would be colored in shades of imperial red. Most importantly, they certainly could not imagine how all of it would eventually disappear. Because empires, despite what their rulers insist, are rather like sunsets. Magnificent while they last, entirely convinced they will continue forever. And then, almost without noticing, the light begins to fade. The British Empire would become the largest empire in human history. At its height, it stretched across every inhabited continent. The old saying claimed that the sun never set upon it because somewhere, at every moment of the day, British officials were collecting taxes, soldiers were drilling, merchants were bargaining, governors were writing reports, and ordinary families were trying to build lives beneath the Union Jack. It sounded wonderfully permanent. History enjoys proving such assumptions wrong. So tonight, we travel slowly through nearly 5 centuries of ambition, exploration, invention, conquest, trade, revolution, war, triumph, tragedy, and quiet decline. Not simply to watch kings and queens change places upon ornate thrones, but to meet the sailors, farmers, clerks, dock workers, soldiers, enslaved people, factory workers, merchants, teachers, children, and dreamers whose ordinary lives became woven into something unimaginably vast. Because every empire is ultimately built one ordinary morning at a time. Before Britain ruled oceans, it first had to survive its own island. The England of the late Middle Ages hardly resembled the confident imperial power remembered today. Roads were muddy tracks. Villages disappeared into forests long before sunset. Wolves had only recently vanished from much of the countryside, although life remained dangerous enough without them. Winters felt endless. Harvests frequently failed. Disease visited with depressing regularity. Traveling even 50 miles could feel like crossing into another world. London existed, certainly, but compared with the great cities of Europe or Asia, it was modest. Constantinople dazzled travelers with magnificent churches. Venice floated elegantly upon its lagoons, enriched by Mediterranean commerce. Beijing housed perhaps 1 million residents behind enormous walls. Delhi bustled with merchants from across Asia. London, meanwhile, smelled strongly of smoke, horses, fish, and humanity. To be fair, most medieval cities smelled similarly unpleasant. Civilization has always been remarkably talented at inventing unpleasant aromas. England itself occupied the edge of Europe. Powerful kingdoms such as France and Spain commanded larger populations and richer agricultural lands. Portugal had already begun exploring Atlantic waters. Italian merchants dominated much of international trade. England was important, just not exceptionally important. For centuries, English kings spent far more energy worrying about nearby France than distant oceans. Their wealth came from farming, wool production, and local trade. Ambitious nobles dreamed about neighboring territories rather than unknown continents. The sea represented opportunity. It also represented fear. Ships remained fragile things. Storms could erase entire fleets without warning. Navigation depended upon experience, stars, and educated guesses. Maps contained enormous blank spaces decorated with sea monsters, imaginary islands, and wonderfully creative speculation. Cartographers occasionally solved uncertainty by drawing terrifying creatures in unexplored waters. It was a surprisingly honest admission. We truly have no idea what's out here. Meanwhile, beyond European awareness, astonishing civilizations flourished. The Ming dynasty governed China with sophisticated bureaucracy and engineering. The Ottoman Empire expanded steadily across southeastern Europe and the Middle East. The Aztec Empire dominated central Mexico. The Inca ruled enormous Andean territories. Across Africa, kingdoms traded gold, ivory, textiles, and knowledge. History rarely waits for one civilization alone. It prefers many stories unfolding simultaneously. Yet Europe stood upon the edge of transformation. Several inventions quietly reshaped possibilities. The magnetic compass improved navigation. The printing press spread knowledge faster than scribes ever could. Shipbuilding advanced year after year. New financial systems allowed merchants to invest collectively in expensive voyages. Suddenly, oceans looked slightly less impossible. Still dangerous. Just potentially profitable. And nothing attracts ambitious governments quite like potential profit, especially when accompanied by spices. Modern grocery stores hardly inspire wars over cinnamon. Imagine explaining that to someone from the 15th century. Entire fortunes depended upon pepper, cloves, nutmeg, and cinnamon. These precious spices preserved food, flavored otherwise monotonous meals, supplied medicines, and demonstrated wealth. A sack of pepper could transform lives. Whoever controlled spice routes controlled extraordinary wealth. Unfortunately for Western Europe, existing trade passed through complicated networks stretching across Asia and the Middle East before reaching Mediterranean merchants. Every middleman understandably preferred earning money. Prices climbed steadily. European rulers wondered, could another route exist? Portugal answered first. Prince Henry the Navigator sponsored exploration along Africa's coast. Portuguese sailors gradually pushed farther south, establishing trading posts while gathering knowledge of winds and currents. Progress remained painfully slow. Years passed. Decades. One voyage after another. Sometimes history resembles less a glorious charge and more someone cautiously poking unknown territory with a very long stick. Eventually, Portuguese explorers rounded Africa's southern tip. Then came India. Sea routes connected Europe directly with Asia. The implications were enormous. Spain responded by funding Christopher Columbus. His calculations proved spectacularly wrong. Fortunately for him, an entire pair of continents happened to interrupt his mistake. History occasionally rewards confidence more generously than accuracy. The discovery, or rather European awareness, of the Americas changed everything. Suddenly, unimaginable lands promised unimaginable wealth. Gold, silver, sugar, timber, fish, furs, land itself. European kingdoms entered fierce competition. England watched carefully. At first, somewhat enviously. The Spanish Empire grew rapidly, fueled by American silver flowing across oceans in staggering quantities. Portuguese merchants established networks reaching Africa, India, Southeast Asia, China, and Japan. England risked being left behind. Then circumstances changed. The Tudor dynasty strengthened royal authority after decades of internal conflict known as the Wars of the Roses. These brutal struggles had exhausted England's nobility. Peace, although imperfect, gradually returned. Henry VII stabilized finances. Henry VIII transformed religion. Elizabeth I transformed ambition. Her reign would become one of the most remarkable chapters in English history. When Elizabeth became queen in 1558, England remained relatively small compared with Europe's greatest powers. She inherited religious conflict, economic uncertainty, foreign threats, political conspiracies, a treasury that always seemed rather emptier than anyone preferred. Queens generally appreciate full treasuries. Elizabeth possessed remarkable intelligence, extraordinary political instincts, and endless patience. She understood that England could never match Spain through sheer numbers. So it needed something else. Ships. Fast ships. Well-armed ships. And captains bold enough, or reckless enough, to sail almost anywhere. England's coastline naturally encouraged maritime culture. Fishing communities produced experienced sailors. Merchants invested in commerce. Shipyards experimented constantly with design improvements. Gradually, English vessels became lighter, faster, and more maneuverable than many rivals. They would need every advantage. Because Spain remained unimaginably powerful. Its empire stretched across oceans. Its armies terrified Europe. Its treasure fleets crossed the Atlantic carrying astonishing wealth. Naturally, English privateers found this arrangement extremely interesting. Privateers occupied a wonderfully complicated position. Officially, they were licensed by the Crown to attack enemy shipping during wartime. Unofficially, they looked suspiciously like pirates with better paperwork. Men such as Francis Drake sailed around the world raiding Spanish settlements, capturing treasure, and returning home celebrated as heroes. The Spanish considered them criminals. The English preferred the term entrepreneurial. Perspective matters enormously in history. Drake's circumnavigation between 1577 and 1580 electrified England. The voyage proved English ships could travel globally. It demonstrated navigational skill, military effectiveness, commercial possibility. Most importantly, confidence. Confidence often precedes empire. Elizabeth encouraged exploration carefully. She lacked unlimited resources. Every expedition represented significant risk. Ships disappeared regularly. Investors lost fortunes. Colonies failed almost as often as they succeeded. One early attempt established a settlement on Roanoke Island. When relief finally arrived years later, everyone had vanished. No bodies. No survivors. Just a carved word. Croton. One of history's greatest mysteries quietly entered legend. Empires rarely begin smoothly. Failure teaches lessons. Sometimes fatal ones. England learned repeatedly that surviving across oceans demanded organization, supplies, discipline, diplomacy, and extraordinary persistence. The sea rewarded preparation. It punished arrogance, at least temporarily, because arrogance has an unfortunate tendency to return once success appears. For now, however, England remained hungry, not yet dominant, not yet wealthy beyond imagination, simply determined. Then came the greatest test of Elizabeth's reign, the Spanish Armada. An enormous fleet assembled to invade England in 1588. Spain expected swift victory. England expected, well, survival would be nice. Storm clouds gathered over the channel. Church bells echoed across villages. Militias assembled nervously. Sailors prepared ships through sleepless nights. No one knew whether England itself might cease to exist as an independent Protestant kingdom. The coming battle would shape centuries of history, and with it, the first true sunrise of what would eventually become the British Empire. But that story belongs to the next quiet chapter. So for now, let the waves continue their endless rhythm against England's shore. Listen to the wind moving across dark water. Tiny ships rock gently in their harbors beneath a sky filled with patient stars, unaware that they are waiting at the edge of history itself. The Armada, the ocean, and the first seeds of empire. The night before great events rarely announces itself with trumpets. More often, it arrives quietly. A fisherman pulls his boat onto a pebbled beach, grumbling about the weather. A baker wakes long before dawn to knead another day's bread. Somewhere, a blacksmith stirs dying embers back to life. Children sleep peacefully, blissfully unaware that adults have begun whispering about war. So it was in the summer of 1588. Across southern England, rumors drifted through villages faster than official messages ever could. Spain was coming. Not a raid. Not a handful of pirates. An invasion. King Philip II had assembled what he proudly called the Grande y Felicissima Armada, the great and most fortunate navy. History usually remembers it simply as the Spanish Armada. Philip II of Spain. It was a name intended to inspire confidence. As history repeatedly demonstrates, naming something most fortunate is an excellent way to tempt fate. For years, relations between England and Spain had steadily deteriorated. Elizabeth supported Protestant rebels in the Spanish Netherlands. English privateers captured Spanish treasure ships whenever they found them floating conveniently nearby, which, from Spain's perspective, was remarkably inconsiderate. Meanwhile, the execution of the Catholic claimant Mary, Queen of Scots, in 1587 convinced Philip that Elizabeth had gone too far. England, he believed, needed replacing, preferably with someone considerably more obedient. Religion mixed with politics. Politics mixed with commerce. Commerce mixed with ambition. And before long, Europe once again found itself preparing to solve complicated diplomatic problems by firing cannonballs at one another. Because of course it did. Imagine standing on the white cliffs near Dover one clear July afternoon. The sea stretches endlessly toward the horizon. Then someone points. At first, you see nothing. Only a faint dark line. Gradually that line grows. Then individual sails emerge. Hundreds of them. Some towering above the water like floating castles. Others clustered tightly together. An entire forest of masts advances across the channel. The sight must have been terrifying. The armada contained around 130 ships carrying approximately 30,000 sailors and soldiers. England possessed fewer resources. Its fleet relied upon speed rather than sheer size. The English commanders understood something important. Defeating Spain through direct boarding actions would be disastrous. Instead, they would keep moving. Strike from a distance. Wear the enemy down. Then trust the weather to finish what cannon began. Sometimes military genius consists less of overwhelming strength than of refusing to fight the battle your opponent expects. English captains such as Francis Drake, John Hawkins, and Charles Howard harassed the armada constantly. Francis Drake, John Hawkins, Charles Howard, 1st Earl of Nottingham. They attacked from safer distances, damaged rigging, destroyed supplies, refused close combat whenever possible. Spanish commanders grew increasingly frustrated. Then came the fireships. Late one evening, the English filled several old vessels with combustible materials, set them ablaze, and sent them drifting directly toward the anchored armada. The tactic itself caused limited physical damage. Its psychological effect proved devastating. Spanish captains panicked. Anchors were cut loose. Ships scattered into confusion. Formation dissolved overnight. The next day, English ships attacked the disorganized fleet near Gravelines. Smoke drifted over gray water. Cannons thundered. Wood splintered. Men shouted through clouds of powder. Then, nature intervened. Strong winds drove the battered armada northward. Unable to regroup or safely return through the English Channel, Spanish commanders attempted the long journey around Scotland and Ireland. Atlantic storms completed the destruction. Ships smashed against rocky coastlines. Thousands drowned. Others starved. The survivors limped home months later. England celebrated. Spain mourned. The invasion had failed. Later generations often imagined the Armada as the exact moment Britain became an empire. History, naturally, prefers slower transformations. The victory mattered enormously, not because England suddenly ruled the world, but because it changed something less tangible. It changed belief. People began thinking differently. If mighty Spain could be resisted, perhaps oceans could truly be crossed. Perhaps colonies might survive. Perhaps England's future lay beyond Europe. Confidence is contagious. Success feeds ambition. Ambition rarely knows when to stop. As the 16th century faded into the 17th, England slowly turned its gaze westward. Across the Atlantic stretched enormous coastlines that Europeans still barely understood. Maps remained speculative. Many rivers had no European names. Mountain ranges appeared where none existed. Entire civilizations went unnoticed or misunderstood. To many investors in London, however, America represented possibility. Possibility has always attracted money remarkably efficiently. Merchant companies emerged to finance exploration. Rather than relying entirely upon royal funding, wealthy investors pooled resources. If expeditions succeeded, everyone profited. If they failed, well, at least everyone lost money together. Thus emerged one of history's most influential inventions, the chartered company. Governments granted monopolies. Private investors supplied capital. Ships carried settlers, goods, and dreams. The arrangement blurred the line between public authority and private business in fascinating and occasionally disastrous ways. This model would eventually reshape continents. But first, someone actually had to survive overseas. In 1607, 3 small English ships entered the Chesapeake Bay. After months at sea, exhausted sailors gazed upon forests unlike anything they had ever seen. Tall pines stretched toward endless skies. Birdsong echoed through humid air. Rivers shimmered beneath the summer sun. The newcomers named their settlement Jamestown, honoring their king, James I. Jamestown, James VI, and I. It nearly failed immediately. The location seemed defensible. It also happened to contain swampy ground, mosquitoes, contaminated water, and disease. Not ideal. Within months, illness spread rapidly. Food became scarce. Relations with nearby Powhatan communities alternated between trade and violence. Many settlers had expected easy riches. Instead, they encountered relentless labor. Trees required clearing. Shelters required building. Fields required planting. Winter required surviving. Gold, unfortunately, remained stubbornly absent. One unfortunate pattern repeated itself throughout imperial history. People expecting treasure usually found hard work instead. The winter of 1609 became infamous. Historians call it the starving time. Only about 60 of several hundred colonists survived. Archaeological evidence suggests desperation reached horrifying extremes. Some settlers resorted to cannibalism. Empire often appears glorious when painted upon maps. It looks considerably less glamorous when viewed from inside a freezing fort with empty food stores. Yet Jamestown endured. Barely. The arrival of new settlers, supplies, and better leadership gradually stabilized the colony. Then another discovery transformed everything. Not gold. Tobacco. A colonist named John Rolfe successfully cultivated a sweeter variety that appealed strongly to European consumers. John Rolfe. Demand exploded. Fields expanded. Exports increased. Profits followed. Where money flowed. More settlers soon arrived. Entire landscapes changed. Forests disappeared beneath plantations. Native communities lost hunting grounds. Conflicts intensified. The story would repeat itself across countless frontiers. Back in England, another quiet revolution unfolded. In 1600, Queen Elizabeth had granted a royal charter to a new enterprise with an extraordinarily long name. The Governor and Company of Merchants of London trading into the East Indies. Thankfully, history shortened it. The East India Company was born. East India Company. At first, its ambitions seemed surprisingly modest. Trade. Nothing more. Purchase spices. Sell textiles. Return home wealthier than before. Simple. Except commerce has a curious habit of demanding protection. Protection requires soldiers. Soldiers require forts. Forts require territory. Territory requires administration. Administration slowly becomes government. Without quite noticing, merchants sometimes wake up ruling millions of people. The East India Company had no intention of creating an empire. Neither, perhaps, did many empires. They simply kept solving one practical problem after another until they found themselves governing enormous populations. It was remarkably convenient. For shareholders, anyway. While merchants sailed toward India, another remarkable event quietly reshaped the British Isles. In 1603, James VI of Scotland inherited the English throne after Elizabeth died without children. For the first time, England and Scotland shared the same monarch. The kingdoms remained legally separate. But politically, something profound had begun. The island itself moved slowly toward unity. Not everyone welcomed the arrangement. Many never would. History enjoys reminding us that political unions are easier to sign on parchment than in people's hearts. Still, the foundation existed. One day, there would not merely be England. There would be Britain. And eventually, the British Empire. Meanwhile, ordinary life changed almost imperceptibly. Dockyards expanded. Shipwrights experimented with stronger hulls. Navigation improved. Maps grew more accurate. Merchants became wealthier. London itself expanded outward. The city buzzed with languages from distant lands. Coffee houses appeared. Inside them, merchants debated shipping prices. Sailors exchanged rumors from Africa and Asia. Writers discussed philosophy. Politicians argued endlessly. One suspects they still would have argued endlessly even if everyone agreed. Some traditions prove remarkably durable. Coffee houses became unofficial headquarters of commerce. Deals worth fortunes began over steaming cups. Insurance markets emerged. Banks evolved. Credit expanded. Risk became measurable. The machinery of global trade slowly assembled itself, not through dramatic announcements, but through thousands of ordinary conversations held beneath smoky ceilings. Empires are not built solely by admirals. They are also built by accountants. As evening settles over 17th century London, lanterns flicker to life along narrow streets. Somewhere, a clerk carefully records cargo arriving from Virginia. Nearby, a merchant calculates expected profits from India. At the docks, sailors unload barrels while gulls circle overhead, crying into the cool night air. Across the ocean, settlers watch unfamiliar stars rise above dark forests. In distant seas, East India Company ships ride gentle swells toward lands most English people will never see. None of them realize they are laying the foundations of something that will one day span continents. The empire has not yet arrived, but its heartbeat has begun, and with every voyage leaving the Thames, it grows just a little louder. Merchants, kings, and the birth of a world empire. If you had wandered through the docks of London sometime around the middle of the 17th century, you might have thought the city was slowly learning to breathe through the sea. Every tide brought something new. Barrels of tobacco from Virginia, sugar from the Caribbean, silks from Persia, pepper from India, tea from China, though not yet in the astonishing quantities that would one day define British afternoons. Ships creaked gently against weathered wharves. Sailors shouted in half a dozen languages. Cranes groaned as enormous cargoes swung slowly through damp morning fog. The smell was unforgettable, a mixture of tar, salt water, spices, smoke, wet rope, fish, horses, and humanity. Not pleasant, but undeniably prosperous. London was becoming something entirely new. No longer merely England's capital. It was becoming the beating heart of a growing commercial world. Yet the road toward empire was anything but smooth. Back home, Britain, or rather England, Scotland, and Ireland, spent much of the 17th century arguing with itself. Quite violently, as it happened, kings believed they ruled by divine right. Parliament increasingly disagreed. Religion divided families, neighbors, and entire regions. Taxes angered merchants. Political distrust poisoned nearly every institution. Eventually, arguments that had once filled meeting halls spilled onto battlefields. The English Civil War erupted in 1642. English Civil War. Imagine living through those years. 1 month your local lord supports the king. The next month Parliament's soldiers arrive. Churches change religious practices depending on who currently controls the town. Neighbors begin asking uncomfortable questions about one another's loyalties. Ordinary people, as usual, pay the highest price for extraordinary politics. Fields go untended. Trade slows. Families scatter. Young men disappear into armies. No one can quite predict what tomorrow will bring. At the center of the conflict stood King Charles I. Charles I of England. He firmly believed kings answered only to God. Parliament believed kings should also answer to Parliament. Neither side seemed especially interested in compromise. After years of brutal fighting, Parliament emerged victorious. Then history took an astonishing turn. In January 1649, Charles I was publicly executed outside the Banqueting House in London. A reigning English king, beheaded by his own subjects. Europe watched in disbelief. For centuries, monarchs had claimed sacred authority. Now one lay dead beneath a winter sky while crowds looked on in stunned silence. It was a reminder that even kings could become temporary. Empires would eventually learn the same lesson. England became a republic known as the Commonwealth under the leadership of Oliver Cromwell. Oliver Cromwell. Cromwell remains one of history's most controversial figures. To some, he defended parliamentary liberty. To others, particularly in Ireland, his campaigns became symbols of extraordinary brutality. History rarely offers perfectly heroic characters. It usually provides complicated human beings making decisions whose consequences echo for centuries. While politics convulsed the islands, something remarkable continued almost uninterrupted. Trade. Merchants kept sailing. Ships kept crossing oceans. Profits remained wonderfully persuasive. Even civil war proved unable to halt commerce for long. Money, after all, dislikes standing still. During these turbulent decades, the English government passed a series of navigation acts designed to strengthen national shipping. Navigation acts. The idea sounded simple. Goods entering English ports should travel aboard English ships. Colonial trade should benefit English merchants. Foreign competitors, especially the Dutch, should politely find business elsewhere. Predictably, the Dutch disagreed. The Dutch Republic possessed perhaps the finest merchant fleet on earth. Its sailors dominated European commerce. Its ports overflowed with wealth. Its bankers financed international trade. The resulting rivalry led to several Anglo-Dutch wars. Anglo-Dutch wars. Unlike many earlier conflicts centered on kings or religion, these wars largely revolved around trade routes. Commerce had become powerful enough to start wars all by itself. A rather worrying development, one that humanity would continue perfecting. Battles erupted across oceans rather than merely across neighboring fields. Naval tactics evolved rapidly. Ship design improved. Cannons grew heavier. Captains became increasingly professional. Control of the sea gradually emerged as Britain's greatest strategic advantage. Not immediately, but steadily. Almost imperceptibly. Then came one of London's darkest nights. Actually, several nights. In September 1666, fire broke out in a bakery on Pudding Lane. It seemed ordinary enough at first. Cities experienced fires regularly. This one refused to stop. Driven by strong winds and fueled by closely packed wooden buildings, the flames spread with terrifying speed. The Great Fire of London raged for 4 days. Great Fire of London. Imagine standing upon a distant hill overlooking the city. An orange glow fills the night sky. Church towers collapse one after another. Entire neighborhoods disappear beneath rolling smoke. People drag furniture through crowded streets, hoping to save what little they can. The heat becomes unbearable. The sound. Contemporaries described an almost constant roar, as though the city itself had become a giant furnace. Thousands lost homes. Remarkably few lost their lives. When the fire finally died, much of medieval London had vanished. Yet destruction created opportunity. The city rebuilt itself with wider streets. Brick replaced much of the old timber. Architecture changed. Commerce resumed almost immediately. London seemed determined to become larger than before. And it did. Sometimes cities resemble forests. Fire clears the old growth. New life emerges stronger than anyone expected. Across the Atlantic, meanwhile, England's colonies multiplied. Virginia expanded. Maryland welcomed settlers. Massachusetts flourished despite harsh winters. New York, once a Dutch colony called New Amsterdam, passed into English hands after 1664. One by one, colonies appeared along North America's eastern coast. Each developed differently. Some relied upon tobacco. Others focused upon fishing. Some emphasized trade. Others agriculture. Many attracted religious minorities seeking greater freedom. Many also displaced indigenous peoples whose ancestors had lived there for countless generations. Expansion often looked very different depending upon which side of the frontier one happened to occupy. To settlers, forests promised farms. To native communities, those same forests represented homes already occupied. History contains remarkably few empty lands. Only lands that newcomers failed or refused to understand. Farther south, another system expanded rapidly. Sugar plantations in the Caribbean generated astonishing wealth. Islands such as Barbados and Jamaica became among the richest colonies in the empire. Sugar transformed European diets. Tea sweetened with Caribbean sugar eventually became almost a national ritual. Yet every spoonful carried an invisible human cost. Plantations demanded enormous labor. European landowners turned increasingly toward the transatlantic slave trade. Millions of African men, women, and children were captured, sold, transported across the Atlantic under horrifying conditions, and forced into lifelong bondage. The infamous Middle Passage became one of history's greatest human tragedies. Imagine the silence after a slave ship leaves the African coast. Families separated forever. Villages mourning those who would never return. The ocean swallowing countless names history never recorded. Empires often celebrate their wealth. They speak less enthusiastically about where much of that wealth originated. Britain was deeply involved in this vast and brutal system. So were Portugal, Spain, France, the Netherlands, and others. The profits proved immense. The suffering proved immeasurable. It is impossible to understand the rise of the British Empire without acknowledging both. Back in London, investors continued seeking opportunities farther east. Its early factories, or trading posts, appeared along India's coastline. They purchased cotton textiles, silk, spices, and other valuable goods. Indian craftsmanship astonished European buyers. Fine muslin seemed almost weightless. Printed cotton fabrics became fashionable throughout Europe. Indian merchants negotiated from positions of considerable strength. At this stage, Britain needed India far more than India needed Britain. That balance would eventually change, though not yet. For now, company representatives remained respectful guests. Mostly. Meanwhile, science quietly transformed navigation. Astronomers mapped stars more accurately. Mathematicians improved calculations. Clockmakers struggled towards solving the notorious longitude problem. Knowledge accumulated steadily. Every successful voyage produced better charts. Every chart encouraged additional voyages. The ocean slowly became more familiar, not safer, simply better understood. There is an important difference. Sailors still faced storms capable of tearing ships apart within hours. Scurvy still haunted long voyages. Pirates still prowled strategic waters. Disease remained relentless. A sailor leaving London might never return. Many did not. Empire often appears inevitable when viewed backward through history. Living it felt anything but inevitable. Every voyage balanced ambition against uncertainty. Every departure carried the possibility of permanent farewell. In 1688, another political earthquake reshaped Britain. King James II fled after losing support, and Parliament invited William III and Mary II to rule jointly in what became known as the Glorious Revolution. William III of England, Mary II of England, Glorious Revolution. Unlike earlier revolutions, relatively little blood was shed in England itself. The consequences, however, proved profound. Parliament's authority strengthened. The monarchy accepted constitutional limits. Financial institutions gained greater confidence. Investors believed the government would honor debts. That confidence mattered enormously. Empires require money. Ships require money. Wars require astonishing amounts of money. Reliable governments borrow more easily. Britain gradually became exceptionally good at financing enormous conflicts. Sometimes bookkeeping wins wars before soldiers ever arrive. A few years later, in 1694, the Bank of England opened its doors. Bank of England. Its creation may sound less exciting than sea battles or explorers discovering distant lands. Yet historians often regard it as one of Britain's greatest strategic advantages. The bank stabilized government borrowing. It reassured investors. It strengthened public finance. Future wars, colonies, and global trade networks would all depend upon this quiet financial revolution. Behind every famous admiral stood countless anonymous clerks carefully balancing ledgers. History remembers admirals. Civilizations often depend upon accountants. As the 17th century draws to its close, snow begins falling softly over London. Ships rest quietly along the frozen Thames. Church bells echo through crisp winter air. Inside coffee houses, merchants unfold maps stretching across oceans. They trace routes with ink-stained fingers. Virginia, Barbados, Madras, Bombay, the Caribbean, West Africa, the Atlantic, the Indian Ocean. These places still seem scattered, disconnected. But invisible threads of trade are beginning to tie them together. A merchant closes his ledger by candlelight. He cannot know that within the next century, those thin lines of commerce will become the framework of the largest empire the world has ever seen. The seeds have been planted. Soon, they will begin to grow into something astonishing. Britain is born, and the world begins to change. There are moments in history that arrive with the sound of cannon fire. And there are others that arrive quietly, signed with ink upon parchment in rooms that smell faintly of candle wax and damp wool. The year is 1707. Outside, rain falls steadily across Edinburgh's narrow streets. In London, merchants haggle over cargo arriving from distant ports. Farmers guide horses through muddy English lanes, scarcely noticing that the political landscape of their island is about to change forever. The kingdoms of England and Scotland, long neighbors, frequent rivals, occasional allies, and enthusiastic participants in centuries of mutual suspicion, agree to become one nation. The Acts of Union create the Kingdom of Great Britain. Acts of Union 1707. To modern eyes, it may seem like a simple constitutional adjustment. To the people living through it, it was anything but simple. Many Scots celebrated the promise of expanded trade and access to England's growing overseas markets. Many others saw the agreement as a surrender of sovereignty. Some English politicians welcomed a stronger kingdom. Others worried about the costs. Ordinary people, meanwhile, continued much as before. Cows still needed milking. Fishing boats still left before dawn. Bread still had to be baked. History often changes nations long before it changes breakfast. Yet the Union created something powerful. England had possessed ships. Scotland possessed skilled sailors, merchants, engineers, physicians, scholars, and ambitious entrepreneurs. Together, they would help build an empire that neither kingdom could likely have created alone. From this point onward, it becomes increasingly appropriate to speak not simply of England's empire, but of Britain's. The timing could hardly have been better, or perhaps worse, depending on where one happened to live. Across Europe, nearly every major power seemed incapable of remaining at peace for very long. Kings died without clear heirs. Dynasties competed for thrones. Religious divisions lingered. Trade routes tempted ambitious governments. One conflict blurred almost seamlessly into the next. For Britain, these wars became unexpected opportunities. While armies marched across Europe, the Royal Navy slowly tightened its grip upon the seas. Every conflict taught valuable lessons. Every victory expanded influence. Every captured colony opened new possibilities. Britain increasingly discovered that winning naval battles often proved more profitable than winning land battles. Ships could protect commerce. Commerce financed more ships. It was a remarkably efficient cycle. At the center of this expanding world stood London. If you arrived there around 1715, you would scarcely recognize the modest medieval city described by travelers only a century earlier. Its population had exploded. New neighborhoods stretched outward in every direction. Warehouses lined the riverbanks. The Thames itself had become one of the busiest waterways on Earth. Stand beside the docks at sunrise. Mist drifts above the river. Hundreds of masts pierce the pale morning sky like a forest stripped of leaves. Sailors shout as ropes slap against wooden hulls. Dockworkers roll barrels of rum, tobacco, sugar, molasses, coffee, tea, and spices across creaking planks. The accents surrounding you come from everywhere. Irish laborers, Scottish merchants, Dutch traders, French refugees, African sailors, Indian interpreters, Jewish financiers. Chinese goods carried halfway around the globe. The British Empire had not yet reached its greatest size, but already the world was arriving in London, and London was reaching back toward the world. The East India Company grew alongside the city. Its headquarters buzzed with astonishing activity. Clerks copied endless correspondence. Directors debated investments. Maps covered walls. Every arriving ship brought information from thousands of miles away. Prices, politics, harvests, wars, weather, disease. Trade depended upon information almost as much as cargo. A letter from India might require 6 months to reach London. Another 6 months for the reply. Imagine trying to manage a multinational corporation where every conversation takes an entire year. Patience was not simply a virtue. It was a business necessity. The company expanded cautiously. Trading posts appeared at Madras, Bombay, and Calcutta. Fort St. George, Bombay, Castle Fort William. These settlements resembled fortified commercial towns rather than imperial capitals. Company officials remained merchants first. Soldiers existed largely to protect warehouses, or so everyone hoped. History, unfortunately, rarely respects original business plans. Meanwhile, Britain's colonies across North America flourished. Population increased rapidly. Families established farms stretching from New England to Georgia. Forests gave way to fields. Small villages became thriving towns. Harbors bustled with commercial activity. Boston, Philadelphia, Charleston, New York. Each developed its own distinct character. In New England, shipbuilding and fishing dominated. The middle colonies became centers of grain production and trade. The southern colonies depended increasingly upon plantations growing tobacco, rice, and indigo. The colonies were diverse, sometimes surprisingly so. German immigrants settled inland valleys. Scots-Irish families moved toward the frontier. Dutch traditions survived around New York. Enslaved Africans carried languages, music, agricultural knowledge, and cultural traditions that would profoundly shape American society despite the unimaginable violence of slavery. No empire is culturally uniform. It is a conversation, sometimes peaceful, often unequal, frequently painful, always changing. Across the Atlantic, however, another triangle quietly connected continents. Historians call it the triangular trade. The phrase sounds neat, orderly, almost mathematical. Reality was infinitely messier. Manufactured goods left Britain for West Africa. Enslaved Africans were transported across the Atlantic in brutal conditions. Sugar, tobacco, cotton, and other commodities returned to Europe. Profits accumulated at every stage. Ports such as Liverpool and Bristol grew astonishingly wealthy. Banks financed voyages. Insurance companies calculated risks. Shipbuilders expanded production. Factory owners found new markets. Entire cities prospered. Yet beneath every balance sheet lay immeasurable human suffering. Millions of lives shattered so that distant consumers could sweeten tea, smoke tobacco, or wear fashionable fabrics. The wealth of the empire cannot be separated from this tragedy. To tell one story without the other would be to leave history unfinished. By the middle of the 18th century, Britain possessed something no previous kingdom had ever fully achieved: a truly global commercial network. Its ships sailed regularly to North America, the Caribbean, West Africa, India, China, the Mediterranean, the Baltic, the South Atlantic. Goods moved constantly. So did ideas. Scientific discoveries spread rapidly. Books crossed oceans. Religious movements traveled alongside merchants. Languages borrowed words from one another. Recipes changed. Fashion evolved. People who would never meet nevertheless shaped each other's daily lives. Empire was not merely political. It was cultural, economic, personal. One ordinary afternoon in London, a young apprentice enters a coffee house carrying freshly printed newspapers. The room falls strangely quiet. Merchants glance up from conversations. Ship captains pause over maps. Everyone wants the latest news. Has another convoy reached India safely? Did French privateers attack British shipping? What is the sugar price in Jamaica? Did Parliament approve new taxes? Who controls the Caribbean this week? Information has become valuable, sometimes more valuable than cargo itself. The newspapers pass from table to table. Coffee cools forgotten in porcelain cups. Outside, horses clatter across wet cobblestones while church bells echo through damp air. Inside, the machinery of a global empire hums softly beneath polite conversation. Yet Britain was far from unchallenged. France remained a formidable rival. Spain still possessed enormous territories. The Dutch continued competing commercially. The Austrian and Russian empires expanded across Europe. No nation ruled alone. The 18th century became, in many ways, a contest to determine which European power would dominate the world. That contest would eventually stretch across 5 continents. Forests in North America, rice fields in India, sugar islands in the Caribbean, trading posts in Africa, ocean shipping lanes thousands of miles long. It would become known as the 7 Years' War. Some historians call it the first truly global war. They have an excellent argument. Because wherever British ships sailed, French ships were often not very far away. As this quiet chapter draws toward its close, evening settles gently over the Thames. The tide rises. Lanterns shimmer upon dark water. Some ships prepare to depart before dawn. One heads west toward Virginia, another south toward the Gold Coast. A third turns east around Africa toward India. Their destinations differ. Their purpose is the same: trade, profit, opportunity. Few aboard these vessels imagine they are participating in one of history's greatest transformations. To them, it is simply another voyage, another season, another chance to earn a living. History often disguises its biggest moments inside ordinary routines. Soon, however, Britain and France will collide in a struggle so immense that victory will make Britain the dominant imperial power on Earth. Ironically, that same victory will also plant the first seeds of the Empire's greatest future loss. But for now, let the ships drift quietly with the evening tide. The sea is calm. The stars emerge one by one above the masts. And somewhere beyond the horizon, an empire is still rising. The First World War before the World Wars. There is a curious habit that empires develop once they begin to grow. They start believing that distant places are somehow connected. A forest in Canada begins to matter because ships need timber. A sugar plantation in Jamaica matters because London enjoys sweetened tea. A harbor in India matters because merchants require safe anchorage. A small fort beside an African river suddenly becomes strategically important because someone, somewhere, drew a line on a map. Soon enough, every distant shoreline begins to feel strangely close. And when conflict comes, it comes everywhere. The middle years of the 18th century marked exactly such a moment. By now, Britain had become wealthy beyond what most Europeans a century earlier could have imagined. Her merchant fleet crossed nearly every major ocean. London had grown into one of the world's financial capitals. Insurance companies calculated the risks of voyages lasting months. Investors who had never left England quietly financed expeditions to places they could scarcely pronounce. Yet one rival refused to disappear: France. The rivalry between Britain and France stretched back centuries, but now it had become something entirely different. It was no longer simply about neighboring kingdoms across the English Channel. Now the competition extended across continents. French fur traders navigated the rivers of North America. British settlers pushed steadily westward. French merchants competed in India. British merchants answered in kind. The Caribbean's sugar islands became prizes worth fighting for. Even remote fishing grounds off Newfoundland attracted fierce competition. The world itself had become the battlefield. Imagine opening a map in London around 1755. Pins mark British interests. More pins mark French interests. Someone notices they are beginning to overlap. History has repeatedly demonstrated that overlapping imperial ambitions rarely end with polite conversation. Instead, they usually involve cannon. In North America, the conflict began quietly enough. French explorers had built an extraordinary network stretching from Canada down the Mississippi River toward Louisiana. Rather than settling densely, they established forts connected by rivers and alliances with many indigenous nations. The British colonies, meanwhile, expanded relentlessly along the Atlantic coast. Their populations grew much faster. More families arrived each year. More farmland was needed. More forests disappeared beneath axes. Eventually, settlers reached the Appalachian Mountains. Beyond those mountains lay the Ohio Valley. Everyone wanted it. The French considered it theirs. Many indigenous nations considered it theirs. British colonists increasingly considered it theirs. Three different answers to the same question. That rarely ends peacefully. One young officer named George Washington found himself caught in these early confrontations. George Washington. Long before becoming the first president of the United States, Washington was a relatively inexperienced officer sent into the wilderness to challenge French expansion. His mission did not go especially well. A series of skirmishes escalated rapidly. Small battles became larger ones. Alliances shifted. Before long, Europe itself joined the conflict. The 7 Years' War had begun. 7 Years' War. Although Europeans gave it that name, the war stretched far beyond Europe. It reached North America. India, West Africa, the Caribbean, the Mediterranean, the Atlantic Ocean, the Pacific. Some historians call it the first truly global war. It is difficult to argue otherwise. For ordinary soldiers, however, grand strategic maps meant very little. Imagine marching through the forests of North America. Towering trees block much of the sunlight. Rain-soaked uniforms already worn thin. Mosquitoes seem determined to conquer both armies equally. Roads barely exist. Supplies arrive late, if they arrive at all. European officers trained for neat battlefields soon discovered that dense forests ignored elegant military formations. Gunfire echoed strangely between trees. Visibility vanished after only a few hundred yards. Local knowledge often mattered more than polished uniforms. Many indigenous warriors possessed exactly that advantage. Several native nations allied with the French. Others supported Britain. Still others attempted to protect their own independence while navigating impossible choices. Too often, later histories treated indigenous peoples as supporting characters. They were not. They pursued their own goals, defended their own homelands, and made strategic decisions based upon survival rather than European politics. Unfortunately, whichever European power eventually triumphed, native communities usually lost far more. While forests echoed with musket fire, another struggle unfolded thousands of miles away. India. At the beginning of the 18th century, the Mughal Empire had dominated much of the Indian subcontinent. Its wealth astonished European visitors. Magnificent cities, thriving textile industries, sophisticated administration, beautiful architecture. The empire remained one of the richest in the world. But by the 1750s, Mughal authority had begun weakening. Regional rulers asserted greater independence. Political rivalries multiplied. European trading companies watched carefully. Merchants have always possessed remarkable instincts for recognizing political instability. The British East India Company and the French East India Company increasingly competed not merely through trade, but through diplomacy and military alliances. Company officials raised private armies. Imagine explaining that sentence to someone in the 16th century. A trading company has its own army. What? And its own forts. Surely that's enough. And its own taxes. Excuse me. History occasionally becomes so unusual that it sounds fictional. Yet it happened. The East India Company gradually transformed from a commercial organization into a military power. Its officers negotiated with local rulers. Its soldiers fought battles. Its accountants carefully recorded the profits. Commerce and conquest had begun to merge. In 1757, events near the town of Plassey changed the future of India and Britain. Battle of Plassey. The company's forces, led by Robert Clive, confronted the army of the Nawab of Bengal. Robert Clive. The battle itself lasted only a few hours. Its consequences lasted centuries. Through military skill, political maneuvering, and secret agreements with dissatisfied local leaders, Clive secured a remarkable victory. Bengal was no ordinary province. It ranked among the richest regions in the world. Its fertile fields produced abundant rice. Its artisans created textiles coveted across Europe. Its rivers supported immense commerce. The East India Company suddenly controlled resources beyond anything its founders had imagined. Merchants had become rulers. Without ever intending to create an empire, they had accidentally acquired one. Well, perhaps accidentally deserves a raised eyebrow. Ambition often arrives wearing the disguise of necessity. Back in Britain, news of victories spread quickly. Newspapers celebrated military triumphs. Coffee houses buzzed with excitement. Church bells rang. Patriotic songs filled taverns. Many people believed Britain stood at the beginning of a glorious new age. They were not entirely wrong. By 1763, the 7 Years' War ended with the Treaty of Paris. Treaty of Paris, 1763. Britain emerged victorious. Canada passed into British hands. French influence in India diminished dramatically. New territories expanded Britain's already impressive overseas possessions. The Royal Navy had demonstrated extraordinary effectiveness. Britain now appeared to be the world's leading imperial power. The sun seemed to shine brighter than ever. There was only one rather inconvenient problem. Victory had been astonishingly expensive. Wars possess an unfortunate tendency to consume money almost as enthusiastically as they consume soldiers. Britain's national debt reached unprecedented levels. Someone needed to pay. Government ministers looked across the Atlantic. The American colonies seemed prosperous. Surely they could contribute a little more. After all, the recent war had partly protected them. The reasoning appeared perfectly sensible in London. It sounded rather different in Boston. Imagine sitting inside a small tavern in Massachusetts during the autumn of 1765. Outside, leaves drift slowly from maple trees. Inside, candles flicker upon rough wooden tables. Farmers, merchants, lawyers, and sailors gather after sunset. A newspaper passes from hand to hand. Parliament has approved another tax. The Stamp Act. Stamp Act 1765. Official documents. Newspapers. Playing cards. Licenses. Printed paper now requires special stamps purchased from British authorities. The tax itself is not especially large. The principle matters far more. The colonists ask a deceptively simple question. If we have no representatives in Parliament, why is Parliament taxing us? The phrase spreads from town to town. No taxation without representation. Governments throughout history have often underestimated how powerful simple slogans can become. British officials remained puzzled. From their perspective, Parliament represented the entire empire. Colonists, they argued, already enjoyed the protection of British law, British soldiers, and the Royal Navy. Paying taxes seemed only fair. Many colonists saw things differently. Distance complicated everything. A decision made in Westminster affected lives thousands of miles away. Letters required weeks or months to cross the Atlantic. Misunderstandings accumulated. Trust slowly eroded. Neither side yet imagined that disagreement would eventually become revolution. Most colonists still considered themselves loyal British subjects. Most British politicians assumed the colonies would ultimately obey. History often reaches its greatest turning points because everyone underestimates them at first. As this chapter gently comes to an end, evening settles over two very different worlds. In London, investors celebrate the empire's greatest victory. Maps hang proudly upon polished walls, now showing British possessions stretching farther than ever before. In Bengal, company officials begin discovering that governing millions of people is considerably more complicated than managing warehouses. Across the forests of North America, indigenous communities wonder what British victory will mean for lands they have called home for generations. And in the American colonies, ordinary people finish supper, extinguish candles, and climb into bed. Few realize that a dispute over taxes has quietly begun. Within a single generation, it will tear the British Empire apart, not destroy it. Not yet. But it will force Britain to reinvent itself. Sometimes the greatest defeats become the beginning of even greater empires. Though, as we shall soon discover, that lesson comes at an extraordinary cost. The empire loses America. If you listen carefully to history, you begin to notice that empires rarely collapse all at once. They crack. Quietly at first. Almost politely. A disagreement over taxes. A governor's unpopular decision. A merchant refusing to unload his cargo. A crowd gathering in a town square. No one present believes they are standing at the beginning of a revolution. They simply believe they are arguing about today's problem. Only later does history gather these ordinary moments together and give them a name. By the late 1760s, Britain's North American colonies stretched like a long ribbon along the Atlantic coast. Nearly 2.5 million people lived there. They farmed wheat and tobacco, built ships, printed newspapers, opened schools, traded with the Caribbean, and increasingly thought of themselves as something slightly different from the people living across the ocean. Still British. But also something else. Distance changes identity. A child born in Boston had never seen London. A farmer in Virginia might know the English king only through coins, official portraits, and royal proclamations that arrived months late. The Atlantic Ocean did more than separate continents. It separated experiences. While Parliament debated policy beneath the gray skies of Westminster, colonists dealt with harsh winters, unfamiliar frontiers, conflicts with indigenous nations, and an economy unlike anything found in Britain itself. The two societies remained connected, but they were slowly growing apart, like branches of the same tree reaching toward different sunlight. The British government, meanwhile, faced an uncomfortable financial reality. The 7 Years' War had brought enormous victories. It had also produced enormous debts. Government ministers examined their ledgers with increasing concern. Someone needed to contribute more revenue. Surely the American colonies, wealthier and safer after Britain's recent military triumph, could help shoulder the burden. One tax followed another. The Townshend Acts imposed duties on imported goods such as glass, paper, paint, and tea. Townshend Acts. British officials considered these modest measures. Many colonists considered them dangerous precedents. Newspapers filled with angry essays. Pamphlets circulated from town to town. Public meetings became increasingly heated. Merchants organized boycotts against British imports. Ordinary households participated. Women, who possessed no political rights within the empire, played an essential role by producing homemade cloth and encouraging families to avoid imported goods. Politics entered kitchens. History often remembers famous speeches. It sometimes forgets the quiet acts of resistance carried out around dinner tables. Then there was tea. Poor tea. It had done nothing wrong. Yet it somehow found itself at the center of one of history's most famous protests. By the early 1770s, tea had become enormously popular throughout the British Empire. The East India Company, however, found itself in financial trouble. The British government attempted to help by allowing the company to sell tea directly to the colonies at lower prices. The logic seemed impeccable. Cheaper tea. Everyone wins. Except many colonists saw something else. If they accepted the tea, they feared they would also be accepting Parliament's right to tax them without their consent. Sometimes symbolism outweighs economics. On a cold December evening in 1773, a group of colonists disguised themselves as Mohawk men, boarded ships in Boston Harbor, and threw more than 300 chests of tea into the water. The event became known as the Boston Tea Party. Boston Tea Party. Imagine standing nearby that night. The harbor is quiet except for splashing water. Heavy wooden chests crash onto the decks before tumbling into the sea. Tea leaves spread across the dark surface like strange floating gardens. No one steals the cargo. Nothing else is damaged. Only the tea disappears beneath the tide. It is remarkably orderly for an act of rebellion. British officials, however, were not amused. Parliament responded with a series of punitive laws known in Britain as the Coercive Acts and in America as the Intolerable Acts. Intolerable Acts. Boston's harbor closed. Massachusetts lost much of its self-government. British troops increased their presence. The intention was clear. Restore order. Demonstrate authority. Discourage further resistance. Instead, the measures united many previously divided colonies. Delegates gathered in Philadelphia. They formed the First Continental Congress. For the first time, representatives from different colonies began acting together. Not yet as an independent nation, but perhaps as something moving quietly in that direction. Spring arrived in 1775. Trees blossomed across New England. Farmers prepared fields for planting. Birdsong returned after winter. Then came Lexington and Concord. British troops marched from Boston, intending to seize colonial military supplies. Local militias confronted them. Nobody knows exactly who fired the first shot. History has argued about it ever since. The musket ball itself has long since disappeared. Its echo has not. The American Revolutionary War had begun. American Revolutionary War. News spread with astonishing speed. Church bells rang. Messengers rode through the night. Families gathered around newspapers. Young men volunteered. Others hesitated. Not everyone supported independence. Many remained loyal to the crown. The revolution divided neighbors as much as it divided empires. Civil wars often do. Across the Atlantic, King George III and his ministers believed the rebellion could be suppressed quickly. George III. After all, Britain possessed one of the world's finest professional armies. The Royal Navy controlled the oceans. The colonies lacked unified leadership. Surely the uprising would collapse. History has a habit of humbling confident predictions. The Continental Army selected George Washington as its commander. Washington understood something essential. He did not necessarily need to destroy Britain's army. He merely needed to avoid losing his own. His soldiers endured extraordinary hardships. Many lacked proper uniforms. Some marched barefoot through snow. Supplies frequently ran short. Disease claimed thousands. Winter camps became exercises in endurance rather than military glory. Imagine the encampment at Valley Forge. Snow covers rough wooden huts. Cold wind whistles through gaps between logs. Boots were thin. Blankets remain scarce. A pot of thin soup simmers over a small fire. Some men write letters home. Others stare silently into the flames. Yet somehow, the army survives. Sometimes victory belongs simply to those who refuse to disappear. Britain won many battles. It captured cities. Its soldiers fought with discipline and courage. Yet controlling territory proved remarkably difficult. Every road required protection. Every supply convoy demanded escorts. The countryside remained uncertain. Distance again became Britain's enemy. Every musket, every cannon, every replacement uniform, every loaf of bread. Everything had to cross the Atlantic. Storms delayed ships. Privateers attacked merchant vessels. Communication moved painfully slowly. Decisions made in London often reflected conditions that had changed months earlier. Empires become remarkably awkward when they attempt to govern continents from across oceans. Then the war became international. France saw opportunity. Still remembering its defeat in the 7 Years' War, France allied with the American revolutionaries in 1778. Kingdom of France. Spain joined later. The Dutch Republic also entered the wider conflict. Britain suddenly found itself fighting not merely rebellious colonies, but several major European powers. The war spread across the Caribbean, across European waters, into India, around the globe. The empire's greatest strength, its worldwide reach, also became one of its greatest vulnerabilities. There were simply too many places requiring protection. Everything came to a head at Yorktown in 1781. Siege of Yorktown. British General Charles Cornwallis established defensive positions while expecting support from the Royal Navy. Charles Cornwallis, 1st Marquis Cornwallis. The support never arrived in time. A French fleet blocked British reinforcements. American and French forces surrounded the town. Artillery thundered day after day. Smoke drifted above the autumn landscape. Eventually, Cornwallis surrendered. Imagine the silence after the final cannon falls quiet. British soldiers stack their muskets. Military bands play solemn tunes. Flags flutter gently in the October breeze. No great speech changes history. Only exhausted men accepting what has become unavoidable. The war continued briefly. Its outcome no longer remained in serious doubt. In 1783, Britain recognized the independence of the United States through another Treaty of Paris. Treaty of Paris, 1783. The 13 colonies were gone. For many observers, it appeared to be a devastating imperial defeat. And it certainly was. Britain had lost some of its oldest and most populous colonies. Many politicians wondered whether the empire itself might now begin to unravel. Yet history had one more surprise waiting. Instead of abandoning imperial ambitions, Britain redirected them. If America was lost, perhaps greater opportunities existed elsewhere, toward Africa, toward Asia, especially toward India. The empire was about to reinvent itself, and in doing so, it would become larger than ever before. As night settles over the Atlantic, waves roll gently beneath a sky crowded with stars. Somewhere, a British transport ship sails home carrying weary soldiers. Elsewhere, an American merchant vessel prepares for its first voyage as part of a new nation. In London, politicians debate what went wrong. In Calcutta, East India Company officials scarcely realize that their distant trading posts are about to become the center of Britain's imperial future. An empire has suffered its greatest humiliation, but it has not reached its greatest power. That chapter still lies ahead. The empire turns east. If the loss of America had taught Britain anything, it was that history rarely allows a nation to remain still. An empire could mourn. It could argue. It could blame politicians, generals, admirals, weather, or even fate itself. But eventually, morning arrived. Ships still waited in harbor. Merchants still expected profits. Factories still needed raw materials. The Royal Navy still patrolled the seas. Life, rather inconveniently for those wishing to dwell on past defeats, continued. During the cold winter following the Treaty of Paris, London wore an unusually reflective mood. Walked slowly through the city just after sunrise. The bells of St. Paul's echo through damp air. Coal smoke hangs low over the rooftops. Street vendors arrange vegetables beneath blankets of frost. Dockworkers unload sugar from Jamaica while nearby accountants quietly update maps that no longer include Britain's 13 American colonies. There is disappointment. Certainly. There is also determination. One merchant, warming his hands beside a brazier, shrugs and remarks that there is still plenty of world left. He is more correct than he realizes. For while Britain had lost an empire in the West, it was about to discover a far larger one in the East. The East India Company had survived the American Revolution almost untouched. Its warehouses still overflowed with textiles, spices, tea, silk, saltpeter, and countless other goods flowing through the ports of India. The company's directors in London watched events with increasing confidence. North America had become politically troublesome. India, they believed, offered something better. Commerce. Order. Opportunity. Of course, history has an amusing habit of making complicated things appear wonderfully simple on paper. India in the late 18th century was anything but simple. The once powerful Mughal Empire still existed, but its authority had weakened dramatically. The emperor remained in Delhi, surrounded by the magnificent architecture of his ancestors. Yet beyond the city walls, regional rulers increasingly governed themselves. The Maratha Confederacy dominated large portions of western and central India. Maratha Confederacy. The Kingdom of Mysore emerged as a formidable military power in the south. Kingdom of Mysore. The Nizam of Hyderabad controlled vast territories across the Deccan. Hyderabad State. The Sikh states gathered strength in the Punjab. Dozens of local rulers balanced diplomacy, warfare, alliances, and commerce in an endlessly shifting political landscape. To company officials arriving from London, the subcontinent often appeared bewilderingly complex. To Indians, it was simply home. The company soon discovered that protecting trade frequently meant becoming involved in local politics. One prince requested military assistance against a rival. Another sought loans. A third promised trading privileges in exchange for soldiers. The company accepted, then accepted another agreement, and another. Every treaty required enforcement. Every alliance created new enemies. Every military victory expanded responsibility. The company's army grew steadily. At first, a few thousand men, then tens of thousands. Eventually, hundreds of thousands. Remarkably, most of these soldiers were not British. They were Indian recruits known as sepoys, trained in European military methods while remaining deeply rooted in their own languages, religions, and traditions. Sepoy. Imagine the parade grounds outside Calcutta. The morning sun rises through humid air. British officers bark commands. Indian soldiers drill in precise formation. Drums echo across the dusty field. Bright uniforms contrast against tropical greenery. Two very different worlds are learning to march together, though not always willingly. Back in Britain, few ordinary people fully understood what the company was becoming. Many imagined warehouses filled with exotic goods. They pictured spices, silks, tea. They did not imagine a private corporation governing millions of people. Yet that is precisely what was happening. The company collected taxes, maintained courts, negotiated treaties, built roads, raised armies, declared wars. In many respects, it functioned as a state. Only its ultimate purpose remained profit. History offers surprisingly few examples of corporations possessing this level of political power. Perhaps that is for the best. One of the most influential figures in this transformation was Warren Hastings, appointed the first Governor-General of Bengal in 1773. Warren Hastings. Hastings genuinely admired many aspects of Indian civilization. He encouraged the study of Sanskrit, supported translations of important legal and religious texts, worked with Indian scholars. Yet he also expanded British political authority across the region. Like many historical figures, he embodied contradictions, respect and domination, curiosity and ambition, scholarship and conquest. History rarely separates these qualities as neatly as we might prefer. As company influence expanded, so too did its responsibilities and its mistakes. Collecting taxes from millions of farmers proved extraordinarily complicated. Administrators frequently misunderstood local customs. Corruption flourished. Some officials amassed spectacular personal fortunes. Others struggled honestly under impossible circumstances. Then nature intervened. In 1770, Bengal suffered a catastrophic famine. Crop failures spread across fertile plains. Food prices soared. Villages emptied. Families wandered in desperate search of grain. Historians estimate that millions died. Imagine walking through the countryside during those terrible months. Rice fields stand barren beneath a merciless sun. Markets that once bustled with traders fall strangely silent. The roads fill with people carrying everything they own. Children cry weakly. The smell of smoke from cooking fires becomes increasingly rare. Hunger transforms entire landscapes. The East India Company has long been criticized for failing to respond adequately. Even as famine spread, tax collection often continued. Profits remained important. Too important. The tragedy shocked observers in Britain. Some began asking uncomfortable questions. Should a private company really govern such vast territories? Parliament increasingly thought not. Meanwhile, Britain itself was changing at astonishing speed. For centuries, most people had worked on farms. Villages defined everyday life. Now, something extraordinary began happening in the Midlands and northern England. Small workshops grew into factories. Water wheels powered spinning machines. Steam engines improved year after year. Coal mines expanded. Iron foundries multiplied. The Industrial Revolution had begun. Industrial Revolution. Imagine visiting Manchester around 1790. The city hums from dawn until well after dark. Factory chimneys pour smoke into gray skies. The rhythmic clatter of machinery never quite stops. Workers stream through narrow streets before sunrise. Children hurry alongside parents. The air smells of coal, oil, damp brick, and cotton fibers. It is louder than almost any city Europe has previously known. Older generations scarcely recognize it. For thousands of years, human labor had powered civilization. Now, machines began sharing the burden, sometimes replacing it. Cotton became king. Raw cotton arrived from plantations across the Atlantic, many worked by enslaved laborers. British factories spun it into thread. Weavers transformed it into cloth. Finished textiles traveled across the world, including back to India, whose own textile industries had once dominated global markets. It was one of history's great economic reversals. The empire increasingly functioned as an interconnected system. Raw materials moved one direction. Manufactured goods moved another. Banks financed both. Insurance protected them. The Royal Navy guarded shipping lanes. Every voyage strengthened the system, at least while peace lasted. Peace, however, had become rather unfashionable in Europe. Across the English Channel, France entered its own revolution. In 1789, crowds stormed the Bastille in Paris. Bastille, the monarchy weakened. The old political order crumbled. Kings across Europe watched nervously. Britain observed events with a mixture of fascination and horror. Some welcomed revolutionary ideals. Others feared chaos. At first, many believed France's turmoil would remain confined within its borders. Then a young artillery officer named Napoleon Bonaparte began winning battles. Napoleon Bonaparte. Quite a lot of battles. Enough, in fact, to reshape Europe. The next great chapter of the British Empire would not begin in India or America. It would begin with one extraordinary man whose ambitions seemed almost as limitless as the empire itself. As this evening's journey draws gently toward its close, picture the world around the year 1800. A merchant ship slips quietly down the Thames beneath pale moonlight. In Calcutta, company clerks finish recording another day's tax receipts. In Manchester, Factory machines finally fall silent after hours of relentless motion. Across France, soldiers gather beneath new revolutionary banners. And somewhere on a lonely Mediterranean shore, a young general studies maps by candlelight, already dreaming of conquering continents. Britain has survived losing America. It has begun building a new empire in India. Its factories are transforming the way humanity works. Its navy rules the waves. Yet its greatest challenge has only just appeared on the horizon. For soon, Britain and Napoleon will wage a struggle that will determine not only the future of Europe, but the destiny of the British Empire itself. The sea remains calm for now, but beyond that quiet horizon, a storm is gathering. Napoleon and the empire that ruled the seas. There are few sounds more peaceful than the creaking of a wooden ship at anchor, the gentle slap of water against the hull, the soft whistle of wind through a maze of ropes, a lantern swinging lazily above the deck. Somewhere below, exhausted sailors sleep in hammocks that sway with every passing wave. For a moment, the world feels wonderfully calm. Then a lookout spot sails on the horizon. Within minutes, silence becomes shouting. Drums beat. Cannons are rolled into position. Powder monkeys race below decks, carrying cartridges much too heavy for their small arms. The peaceful rhythm of the sea disappears beneath the thunder of war. For Britain, the opening years of the 19th century would be spent almost entirely in such moments. Not one battle, not one campaign, but more than 2 decades of nearly continuous conflict with a man whose ambitions seemed as vast as Europe itself. His name, of course, was Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon Bonaparte. When Napoleon seized power in France in 1799, few could predict how dramatically he would reshape the continent. He possessed extraordinary intelligence, boundless energy, an astonishing memory, and an almost supernatural confidence in his own abilities. Sometimes deserved, sometimes not. He reorganized governments, rewrote legal systems, defeated coalition after coalition. One by one, Europe's great armies collapsed before him. Austria, Prussia, various Italian states. Much of continental Europe eventually found itself under French influence or direct control. Only one major opponent refused to surrender: Britain. The island kingdom remained protected by something no French emperor could easily conquer: water. 21 miles of English Channel separated Napoleon from London. 21 miles. It hardly seems much on a modern map. For an invading army in 1805, it might as well have been another planet. Because between France and Britain sailed the Royal Navy. The Royal Navy had quietly become the finest maritime force in the world. This achievement had taken generations. Shipbuilders, officers trained relentlessly. Gunnery became faster. Navigation more precise. Discipline stricter. Experience accumulated. By now, British sailors had spent decades patrolling nearly every major ocean. They knew Atlantic storms, Indian monsoons, Caribbean hurricanes, Arctic fog, Mediterranean currents. The sea itself had become their classroom. Imagine life aboard a 74-gun ship of the line. The vessel stretches nearly 60 meters from bow to stern. 3 towering masts carry an enormous web of sails. Below deck, hundreds of sailors sleep in cramped hammocks suspended inches apart. Fresh water grows stale after weeks at sea. Food consists largely of salted beef, dried peas, hard biscuits, oatmeal, cheese, and whatever fish can be caught. The biscuits often contain tiny insects. Most sailors simply eat them anyway. Extra protein, one might suppose. Life aboard ship demanded extraordinary endurance. Storms tossed enormous vessels like toys. Disease spread rapidly in confined spaces. Punishments remained severe. Accidents claimed lives with depressing regularity. A snapped rope under tension could kill instantly. Yet despite the hardships, many sailors developed fierce loyalty toward their ships. The vessel became home. Crew became family. The ocean became ordinary. At the center of Britain's naval story stood one remarkable figure: Horatio Nelson. Horatio Nelson, 1st Viscount Nelson. Nelson did not resemble the flawless heroes later generations sometimes imagined. He was often ill. He suffered from seasickness, He lost sight in one eye. Later, he lost an arm in battle. His personal life generated endless gossip. He could be impulsive, stubborn, exceptionally dramatic. In other words, wonderfully human. What made Nelson extraordinary was his leadership. He trusted subordinate captains, encouraged initiative, inspired loyalty, and when battle came, he preferred bold action over cautious calculation. Sometimes this approach proved dangerous. Often, it proved decisive. By 1805, Napoleon prepared perhaps his greatest gamble. He hoped to gain temporary control of the English Channel. Even a few days might allow French troops to cross into Britain. An invasion force assembled along the French coast. Flat-bottomed boats waited patiently. Soldiers drilled. Officers studied tides. The plan depended upon the French and Spanish fleets defeating the Royal Navy. Instead, they encountered Nelson. Off the coast of Spain near Cape Trafalgar, two enormous fleets approached one another on October 21, 1805. Battle of Trafalgar. Traditional naval tactics called for long parallel lines exchanging cannon fire. Nelson ignored tradition. Because of course he did. He divided his fleet into two columns and sailed directly toward the combined Franco-Spanish line. It was astonishingly risky. Enemy ships could fire repeatedly as the British approached. Some officers worried the attack bordered on madness. Nelson believed speed and surprise would outweigh the danger. The gamble worked. British ships broke through the enemy formation. Close-range fighting erupted. Smoke covered the sea. Splintered wood flew like deadly arrows. Cannons thundered almost continuously. The smell of gunpowder mixed with salt air. Visibility disappeared beneath gray clouds of smoke. Individual captains fought largely on instinct. Hours later, the combined French and Spanish fleet had been shattered. 22 enemy ships were captured or destroyed. Not a single British ship was lost. It remains one of history's greatest naval victories. Nelson himself did not survive. A French marksman struck him during the battle. Carried below deck, he lived long enough to hear that victory had been secured. His reported final words remain among history's most famous. "Thank God, I have done my duty." Whether every word was recorded perfectly matters less than the truth they represented. Nelson died. Britain ruled the seas. Trafalgar changed everything. Napoleon abandoned serious plans to invade Britain. The Royal Navy's supremacy became unquestioned. For more than a century afterward, no rival fleet seriously threatened Britain's command of the oceans. That dominance shaped the empire in countless ways. Merchant ships crossed oceans with greater confidence. Colonies received supplies more reliably. Enemy commerce could be blockaded. British influence reached almost anywhere accessible by sea. An island nation had become the world's maritime superpower. Napoleon, however, remained undefeated on land. Unable to conquer Britain directly, he attempted another strategy: economic warfare. He introduced the continental system, forbidding European nations under French influence from trading with Britain. Continental system. The idea seemed logical. Britain depended upon commerce. Cut off its markets. Collapse its economy. Simple. Except history enjoys making simple ideas extraordinarily complicated. Smuggling flourished. Merchants ignored restrictions whenever profits appeared attractive. Neutral nations found creative ways to continue trading. The Royal Navy intercepted shipments. European consumers still wanted British goods. British manufacturers still found customers. The blockade never fully succeeded. Sometimes markets prove more stubborn than armies. Meanwhile, Britain's industrial revolution accelerated. Steam engines multiplied. Iron production expanded. Coal output surged. Canals crisscrossed the countryside. Factories appeared in towns that had once been quiet villages. Imagine standing outside a cotton mill before dawn. The sky remains dark. Workers stream silently through factory gates carrying lunches wrapped in cloth. Children no older than 10 hurry beside adults. A bell rings. Machines begin turning. Thousands of spindles spin simultaneously. The sound becomes overwhelming. Hour after hour. Day after day. Britain produced astonishing quantities of cloth, machinery, tools, weapons, and manufactured goods. Factories became as essential to imperial power as warships. The empire increasingly rested upon industry rather than agriculture. Not everyone welcomed these changes. Factory work could be exhausting. Working days commonly stretched 12 or 14 hours. Air inside textile mills filled with fibers. Coal smoke darkened skies. Rapid urban growth created overcrowded housing. Disease spread easily. Many families found themselves caught between old rural traditions and unfamiliar industrial life. Progress often carried hidden costs. The empire's wealth grew. So did inequality. Across the world, Britain's colonies felt the effects of this transformation. Steam-powered industry demanded raw materials. Cotton from India and the American South. Timber from Canada. Sugar from the Caribbean. Wool from Australia. Tea from India and China. Rubber, spices, metals, dyes. The empire increasingly resembled an enormous circulatory system. Resources flowed toward Britain. Manufactured goods flowed outward. Ships connected every part. The oceans became imperial highways. Then, in 1815, everything came to its conclusion. Napoleon escaped exile on the island of Elba and briefly returned to power. Europe held its breath. The final confrontation came near the Belgian village of Waterloo. Battle of Waterloo. British, Dutch, Belgian, and Prussian forces confronted Napoleon's army. Rain soaked the battlefield the night before. Mud slowed artillery. Morning mist drifted across wheat fields. The fighting lasted for hours. Then Prussian reinforcements arrived. The French line collapsed. Napoleon fled. This time, his career truly ended. He was exiled to the remote island of St. Helena in the South Atlantic, where he spent his remaining years far from the Europe he had once dominated. For Britain, Waterloo marked more than military victory. It marked the beginning of a new era. For the first time in generations, the nation faced no comparable rival at sea. Its economy expanded rapidly. Its industries led the world. Its merchants reached every continent. Its colonies multiplied. Its confidence soared. Historians would later call the decades that followed the Pax Britannica the British peace. The phrase sounds wonderfully reassuring. Peace, however, often depends upon whose perspective one happens to share. For many within Britain, these years brought stability and prosperity. For many living under expanding imperial rule, they brought conquest, political control, and profound change. The greatest age of the British Empire was about to begin, and with it, the reign of a young queen whose name would become almost synonymous with empire itself, Queen Victoria. But that is a story for the next quiet evening. The sea is calm once more. Nelson sleeps beneath the stones of St. Paul's Cathedral. Napoleon watches Atlantic waves from a lonely island. And somewhere in the distance, a steam engine whistles into the dawn, announcing that a new age has begun. Steam, iron, and the queen of half the world. The 19th century did not arrive with the crash of armies. It arrived with quieter sounds. The rhythmic hiss of steam escaping a brass valve. The steady clank of iron wheels against newly laid rails. The endless tapping of telegraph operators sending messages faster than any horse could gallop. The distant whistle of locomotives echoing across valleys that had known only birdsong for thousands of years. If the 18th century had belonged to sails, the 19th increasingly belonged to steam. And Britain stood at the center of that transformation. Imagine waking before dawn in Manchester around 1835. The streets are already alive. Factory chimneys send black ribbons of smoke into a pale gray sky. Coal dust settles gently upon rooftops. Workers stream through narrow brick streets carrying lunch tins. A bell rings. Within moments, thousands of machines begin moving together. The sound is unlike anything earlier generations had ever heard. A constant mechanical heartbeat. It never truly stops. This was the Industrial Revolution reaching maturity. Britain produced textiles, locomotives, steam engines, iron rails, machine tools, ships, and weapons in quantities previously unimaginable. Factories consumed vast amounts of coal and iron. Merchants demanded more cotton. Railways demanded more steel. Steamships demanded more fuel. The empire itself became both supplier and customer. India grew cotton. Australia raised wool. Canada supplied timber. The Caribbean exported sugar. Malaya would later provide rubber. Africa increasingly supplied minerals. Raw materials crossed oceans toward Britain. Manufactured goods returned. The cycle accelerated year after year. It was an empire powered not only by soldiers and ships, but by furnaces. In 1837, a young woman only 18 years old became queen. Her name was Victoria, Queen Victoria. Few expected her reign to become one of the longest and most influential in British history. She appeared small in stature, soft-spoken, reserved. Hardly the image of imperial conquest. Yet during her 63 years on the throne, Britain's empire would reach astonishing heights. Victoria herself did not command armies. She did not direct military campaigns. She did not personally govern distant colonies. Instead, she became something equally powerful, a symbol. Across the empire, portraits of the Queen appeared in courtrooms, schools, government offices, railway stations, post offices, and military headquarters. Children born in Canada, India, New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, Jamaica, and countless other places grew up recognizing her face. Many would never see Britain itself, yet they knew the monarch who represented it. Symbols have always mattered to empires, sometimes almost as much as armies. Meanwhile, Britain experienced another transportation revolution, the railway. The first passenger railways had demonstrated astonishing possibilities. Soon investors poured fortunes into railway construction. Imagine standing beside a newly completed railway line in the English countryside. Farmers gather along fences. Children climb trees for a better view. An unfamiliar whistle echoes across the fields. Then, suddenly, a black locomotive appears. Steam billows upward. Iron wheels flash in the sunlight. The machine races forward faster than any horse most spectators have ever seen. Some cheer. Others stare in disbelief. A few worry that traveling at such speeds might somehow damage the human body. History has always been wonderfully creative in imagining new dangers. Within decades, thousands of miles of railway connected British towns and cities. Travel that once required days now took hours. Fresh food reached markets more quickly. Mail traveled faster. Newspapers spread information with unprecedented speed. The railways reshaped time itself. Communities that had once lived largely independent lives suddenly found themselves connected every day. The empire quickly embraced the railway. Not everywhere. Not immediately. But wherever British administrators saw commercial or strategic advantages, tracks soon followed. Nowhere was this more dramatic than in India. The first passenger railway opened there in 1853 between Bombay and Thane. Indian Railways. At first, the journey seemed almost miraculous. Villagers watched enormous iron machines crossing landscapes previously dominated by bullock carts and elephants. Smoke drifted above tropical forests. Bridges crossed rivers that had once delayed travelers for days. Railways brought undeniable benefits. Trade expanded. Travel became easier. Food could move more rapidly during shortages. Communication improved. Yet they also strengthened imperial control. Soldiers reached troubled regions more quickly. Raw materials reached ports more efficiently. Administration became easier. Like so many imperial innovations, the railways served multiple purposes simultaneously. Progress and power often traveled on the same tracks. Then came another invention that shrank the world even further: the electric telegraph. Before its arrival, news traveled only as fast as ships or horses. A message from London to Calcutta might require several months. After telegraph lines spread across continents and beneath oceans, communication that once took months required minutes. Imagine the first telegram arriving in a colonial government office. A clerk unfolds the paper. The governor reads instructions from London sent earlier that very day. For centuries, such speed would have seemed magical. The empire suddenly became more tightly connected than ever before. Distance no longer guaranteed independence. Information itself had become a tool of imperial government. Not every development during Victoria's reign inspired celebration. As Britain industrialized, social problems multiplied. Factories employed children. Urban neighborhoods became dangerously overcrowded. Polluted rivers carried disease. Coal smoke darkened city skies. Charles Dickens walked London's streets and transformed these realities into unforgettable novels. Charles Dickens. Readers encountered orphaned children, debt prisons, factories, workhouses. The empire appeared glorious from palace balconies. Life looked rather different in narrow alleyways. Britain was becoming richer. Not everyone shared equally in that prosperity. Across the Atlantic, another moral question reached its breaking point. For centuries, Britain had participated heavily in the transatlantic slave trade. Ports such as Liverpool and Bristol had grown wealthy from it. Plantations throughout the Caribbean depended upon enslaved labor. By the early 19th century, however, public opinion began changing. Religious groups campaigned tirelessly against slavery. Formerly enslaved people spoke publicly about their experiences. Writers published powerful accounts of human suffering. Among the movement's leading figures was William Wilberforce, who spent decades campaigning against the slave trade. William Wilberforce. In 1807, Britain abolished the transatlantic slave trade. The trade itself became illegal within the British Empire. Yet slavery continued. Only in 1833 did Parliament pass the Slavery Abolition Act, beginning the legal emancipation of most enslaved people throughout the empire. Slavery Abolition Act 1833. The change represented an extraordinary moral milestone. It also remained incomplete. Former enslavers received financial compensation. The formerly enslaved generally did not. Freedom arrived. Justice remained far more elusive. History often advances unevenly. One important step, then another. Rarely all at once. While Britain debated reform at home, its ambitions abroad continued expanding. Explorers mapped rivers previously unknown to Europeans. Missionaries established schools and churches. Scientists cataloged unfamiliar plants and animals. Merchants sought new markets. The Royal Navy suppressed piracy in many regions and increasingly patrolled against illegal slave trading ships. At the same time, imperial influence reached farther into Africa, Southeast Asia, and the Pacific. Many people genuinely believed they were bringing progress. Others recognized that conquest often accompanied those claims. Both realities existed simultaneously. History rarely offers simple verdicts. One evening in London around the middle of Victoria's reign, gas lamps illuminate busy streets. Omnibuses rattle over cobblestones. Steamships crowd the Thames. Telegraph wires stretch overhead like metallic spiderwebs. In shop windows, fabrics from India lie beside tea from China, sugar from the Caribbean, wool from Australia, and mahogany from West Africa. An ordinary shopper strolling along the pavement scarcely notices how global everyday life has become. The empire has entered the household. Quite literally. Tea at breakfast. Sugar in the cup. Cotton clothing. Rubber shoes. Mahogany furniture. Empire surrounds people even when they never leave Britain. Yet beneath this extraordinary confidence, another challenge quietly approaches. It will not come first from Europe, nor from America. It will erupt within India itself, among the very soldiers, the sepoys, who have helped build the East India Company's power. Their rebellion will shake the empire to its foundations. It will end the rule of the East India Company forever, and it will transform Britain from a commercial empire into something far more direct. The age of merchants is nearing its end. The age of imperial government is about to begin. As tonight's chapter closes, a steam train disappears into the evening mist. Its whistle fades across the countryside. Telegraph wires hum softly in the cool air. Far away in India, another sunrise begins. No one yet realizes that within a few years, the greatest uprising in the history of the British Empire will change everything. The Great Rebellion and the Empire of the Crown. Empires often imagine that their greatest dangers come from beyond their borders. A rival fleet on the horizon. An invading army crossing a frontier. A foreign king making ambitious speeches. Sometimes those dangers are very real. But just as often, the greatest challenge comes from within. It begins quietly. A rumor whispered in a barracks. A village meeting that lasts longer than usual. A merchant refusing payment. A soldier asking a question no officer wishes to answer. History rarely announces rebellion with fanfare. It prefers whispers. And in the spring of 1857, whispers drifted across northern India. At first, they seemed almost harmless. The East India Company had now governed vast territories for generations. Its officials believed they understood the land. Its officers believed they commanded loyal armies. Its accountants believed every district could be measured in taxes collected and expenses paid. Confidence had settled over the company like a comfortable old coat. History was preparing to take it away. Imagine a military cantonment at Meerut, just northeast of Delhi. The dry season hangs over the plains. Dust rises beneath marching boots. Rows of whitewashed barracks shimmer beneath the hot afternoon sun. Indian sepoys drill with remarkable precision. British officers watch from horseback. Everything appears orderly, almost peaceful. Yet conversations have begun changing. The soldiers speak in quieter voices. Eyes linger longer than usual. Questions spread from regiment to regiment. Have you heard? Is it true? Could they really ask us to do that? The rumor concerned the new pattern 1853 Enfield rifle. Pattern 1853 Enfield. To load the weapon, soldiers had to bite open greased cartridges before pouring the powder. Many sepoys came to believe that the grease contained beef fat and pork fat. For Hindu soldiers, cows were sacred. For Muslim soldiers, pork was religiously forbidden. Whether every rumor proved accurate mattered less than one simple fact. Thousands of soldiers believed their beliefs were being deliberately disrespected. Trust, once damaged, rarely recovers quickly. Of course, the cartridges alone did not create the crisis. They merely ignited it. The real grievances had accumulated over decades. Many Indian rulers had lost their kingdoms through company expansion. Farmers struggled beneath heavy taxation. Traditional elites watched their authority diminish. Missionary activity created fears that Britain intended widespread religious conversion. Officials introduced legal reforms without always understanding local customs. Economic changes disrupted long-established ways of life. To company administrators, these policies often appeared rational. To many Indians, they felt deeply intrusive. Empires frequently mistake efficiency for acceptance. The two are not the same. On May 10, 1857, the tension finally broke. Sepoys at Meerut rebelled. They attacked British officers, released imprisoned comrades, then marched toward Delhi. As they entered the ancient city, something remarkable happened. The aging Mughal emperor, Bahadur Shah II, became the symbolic leader of the uprising. Bahadur Shah II. He was in his 80s. His political power had long since faded, yet his name still carried immense historical weight. For many rebels, rallying behind the last Mughal emperor transformed scattered mutiny into something larger. A struggle for sovereignty. News spread with astonishing speed. One garrison after another erupted. Some remained loyal. Others joined the rebellion. Entire districts descended into uncertainty. Telegraph operators sent frantic messages across India. British officials struggled to understand the scale of what was unfolding. For the first time in generations, company rule seemed genuinely vulnerable. Imagine Delhi during those first chaotic weeks. The city hums with confusion. Markets close early. Families remain indoors. Smoke rises above distant rooftops. Soldiers hurry through narrow streets lined with centuries-old buildings. The Red Fort, once the magnificent center of Mughal power, suddenly becomes the headquarters of a rebellion. People who only days earlier had worried about ordinary concerns, food prices, marriages, harvests, now wonder who will govern tomorrow. History has a remarkable ability to interrupt ordinary life. The violence that followed remains among the darkest chapters of imperial history. At Kanpur, known to the British as Cawnpur, hundreds of British civilians were killed after surrendering. Kanpur. The news horrified Britain. Newspapers printed emotional accounts. Public anger exploded. Calls for vengeance echoed throughout the country. When British forces regained control, many retaliated with extraordinary brutality. Entire villages suspected of supporting the rebellion were destroyed. Prisoners were executed. Collective punishments became common. The violence spread in both directions. Fear fed revenge. Revenge created more fear. Once such cycles begin, they become painfully difficult to stop. It is important to remember that ordinary people often suffered the most. Families caught between opposing armies. Farmers whose crops disappeared beneath marching columns. Children who scarcely understood why their world had suddenly. History remembers battles. The quiet suffering of civilians is too often forgotten. The Siege of Lucknow became one of the rebellion's defining episodes. Residency, Lucknow. British soldiers, civilians, women, and children endured months trapped inside the residency compound. Outside, rebel forces surrounded them. Summer heat became unbearable. Disease spread. Food dwindled. Shells crashed into buildings day after day. Imagine the silence after bombardment ends each evening. Dust settles through broken windows. Candles flicker in crowded rooms. Parents whisper comforting stories to frightened children. Doctors work by dim lamplight. No one knows whether rescue will arrive. Eventually it did. But only after terrible loss. The siege became legendary throughout Britain. It also symbolized how deeply the rebellion had shaken imperial confidence. Meanwhile, British reinforcements poured into India. Regiments arrived from Britain. Troops diverted from other colonies. Sikh soldiers from the Punjab fought alongside British forces. Gurkha soldiers from Nepal earned lasting reputations for courage. Gradually, through superior resources and relentless campaigning, the rebellion lost momentum. Delhi fell in September 1857. One city after another returned to British control. By the summer of 1858, organized resistance had largely collapsed. The cost had been staggering. Hundreds of thousands died, directly or indirectly, through fighting, disease, famine, and reprisals. Entire communities carried the memory for generations. When the smoke finally cleared, one truth had become impossible to ignore. The East India Company could no longer govern India. Even in Britain, many politicians concluded that allowing a private corporation to rule such an enormous territory had become indefensible. After more than 2.5 centuries, the company's remarkable journey reached its end. In 1858, the British government formally dissolved its political authority. India passed directly under the control of the Crown. Government of India Act 1858. The British Raj had begun. Queen Victoria issued a proclamation promising religious tolerance, equal treatment under the law, and respect for Indian traditions. Many welcomed these assurances. Many remained skeptical. Promises are easier to write than to fulfill. Still, the nature of empire had fundamentally changed. The age of merchant princes had ended. The age of imperial bureaucracy had begun. In London, the transformation felt strangely distant. Parliament debated new administrative structures. Civil servants designed departments. Maps were redrawn. Official seals changed. To many ordinary Britons, daily life continued almost unchanged. Factories still hummed. Railways still expanded. Tea still arrived from Asia. Yet one subtle difference emerged. India was no longer simply another colony. Increasingly, it became the jewel of the empire. Its population dwarfed Britain's. Its resources enriched imperial trade. Its strategic position connected Europe with Asia. Everything from military planning to foreign policy began revolving around India. Then, in 1876, another symbolic moment arrived. Parliament granted Queen Victoria a new title, Empress of India, Queen Victoria. The words carried enormous significance. For centuries, Britain's monarchs had been kings and queens. Now Victoria held an imperial title associated with rulers such as the Roman Caesars and the Mughal emperors. Ceremony surrounded the announcement. Portraits changed. Official documents changed. The empire itself seemed more confident than ever. Confident enough, perhaps, to believe it might last forever. History, as always, smiled quietly. As dusk settles over the plains of northern India, warm air drifts through the ruins left by the rebellion. Some villages begin rebuilding. Fields once abandoned slowly turn green again. Railway engineers survey new routes. Government officials unpack boxes inside freshly organized offices. In London, clerks file away East India Company records into dusty archives, scarcely realizing they have witnessed the end of one of history's most extraordinary corporations. The empire has survived its greatest internal crisis. It has emerged stronger, more centralized, more ambitious, yet also more cautious. In the years ahead, Britain will push deeper into Africa, extend its influence across the Middle East, and tighten its grip on Asia. Soon, nearly 1/4 of humanity will live under the British crown. The maps will glow brighter red than ever before. And somewhere beneath that brilliant color, the first faint shadows of decline have already begun to form. The sun never set. There is an old saying that became almost inseparable from the British Empire. The sun never sets on the British Empire. It sounds like something carved into marble. Confident. Timeless. Almost immortal. The phrase first appeared as a simple observation. Britain's territories were scattered so widely across the globe that, at any given moment, daylight illuminated at least one part of the empire. Morning in New Zealand. Afternoon in India. Sunset in Egypt. Dawn in Canada. Somewhere, always, a Union Jack fluttered beneath blue skies. The saying gradually transformed into something more than geography. It became belief. An empire stretching from the Arctic to the tropics, from Caribbean islands to Pacific harbors, seemed almost beyond history itself. After all, how could something so vast ever disappear? History, of course, had answered that question many times before. The Romans had once believed their empire eternal. The Mongols had ridden across half the known world. The Spanish had ruled oceans. The Ottomans had governed continents. Each eventually discovered that size alone does not guarantee permanence. But during the final decades of the 19th century, very few people imagined Britain's turn would ever come. Imagine unfolding a classroom map in London around 1890. The teacher points with a long wooden stick. Canada. India. Australia. New Zealand. South Africa. Nigeria. Egypt. Malaya. Hong Kong. Countless islands scattered across every ocean. Large portions of the map glow red. Children stare in amazement. Some feel pride. Others simply struggle to memorize all the names before tomorrow's examination. No generation is born believing it lives inside an empire. To children, the world simply appears normal. Only later do they realize how unusual their maps truly were. By now, Britain's influence extended far beyond its formal colonies. Its banks financed railways in South America. Its engineers built bridges in Asia. Its merchants dominated international shipping. Its insurance companies underwrote voyages around the globe. The City of London had become the financial heart of the world. City of London. Stand outside the Royal Exchange on a busy weekday morning. Horse-drawn carriages crowd the streets. Well-dressed bankers hurry through polished stone archways carrying leather cases. Telegraph boys weave through pedestrians clutching freshly delivered messages. News from Bombay arrives. Cotton prices from New Orleans. Gold shipments from South Africa. Tea auctions. Insurance claims. Stock prices. The empire does not merely govern territory. It governs information. Money. Time. An investor in London can influence events thousands of miles away without ever leaving his office. The world grows smaller. Not physically. Economically. The sea remains Britain's greatest advantage. The Royal Navy has grown so powerful that governments across Europe quietly calculate their policies with British ships in mind. New battleships dwarf their wooden predecessors. Steel replaces timber. Steam engines replace sails. Massive naval guns extend farther than anyone imagined only decades earlier. Coal stations appear across the empire so British vessels can refuel during global voyages. A ship leaving Portsmouth may stop at Gibraltar, then Malta, then Aden, then Colombo, then Singapore, then Hong Kong. Like stepping stones across the oceans, every harbor strengthens the next. One of the most important of these stepping stones arrived almost by accident. In 1869, the Suez Canal opened, connecting the Mediterranean Sea with the Red Sea. For centuries, ships traveling between Britain and India had sailed around the southern tip of Africa. The voyage took months. Now, the canal shortened the journey dramatically. Steamships passed through the narrow waterway carrying mail, troops, tea, cotton, machinery, and officials. The canal quickly became one of the most valuable routes on Earth. Britain recognized its importance immediately. In 1875, Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli arranged for Britain to purchase a major share of the Canal Company, strengthening British influence over this vital passage. Benjamin Disraeli. It was one of history's most significant financial decisions, because whoever controlled Suez controlled the fastest route to India, and India remained the empire's beating heart. If London represented the empire's brain, India represented its pulse. By the late 19th century, roughly one-fifth of humanity lived on the Indian subcontinent. Railways now stretched thousands of miles. Telegraph wires connected distant provinces. Universities educated new generations of lawyers, doctors, engineers, and civil servants. Major cities such as Bombay, Calcutta, Madras, and Delhi expanded rapidly. European architecture stood beside Mughal monuments. Horse-drawn trams rattled through crowded streets. Steamships crowded busy harbors. Factories appeared alongside ancient bazaars. The British Raj transformed India in countless ways. Some changes proved beneficial. Modern infrastructure expanded. Medical institutions improved. Universities multiplied. Legal systems became more standardized. Yet these developments existed alongside profound inequalities. Political power remained concentrated in British hands. Economic policies often favored imperial interests. Famines continued, claiming terrible numbers of lives. Local industries sometimes struggled against British manufactured imports. Progress and exploitation often walked together. The empire sincerely believed it was bringing civilization. Many of those being governed wondered why civilization required foreign rule. During these years, another great race unfolded. Not across oceans. Across Africa. European powers suddenly competed to claim enormous portions of the continent in what historians now call the Scramble for Africa. Scramble for Africa. Maps changed astonishingly quickly. Lines drawn in European conference rooms became international borders. Few of those lines reflected local languages, cultures, or kingdoms. Communities that had traded together for centuries sometimes found themselves separated. Others with little shared history suddenly lived within the same colony. The consequences would echo far into the future. Britain acquired territories stretching from Egypt in the north to South Africa in the south. Cecil Rhodes dreamed openly of a continuous chain of British territory from Cape to Cairo. Cecil Rhodes. It was an ambitious vision. History rarely grants every ambitious vision exactly as imagined. Not all expansion occurred without resistance. Far from it. Across Africa, Asia, and elsewhere, local communities resisted British rule in countless ways. Some negotiated. Some protested. Some fought. In Sudan, the forces of the Mahdiist state challenged British and Egyptian control. Mahdiist state. In southern Africa, the Zulu kingdom fiercely defended its independence. Zulu kingdom. During the Anglo-Zulu War of 1879, British troops suffered a shocking defeat at Isinawana, where a well-organized Zulu army overwhelmed a modern European force. Battle of Isinawana. The news stunned Britain. Many had assumed industrial weapons guaranteed easy victory. The battlefield proved otherwise. Technology matters. Leadership matters. Discipline matters. So does determination. Empires sometimes forget that. History reminds them. The Boer War at the turn of the 20th century would provide another painful reminder. Second Boer War. British forces expected a relatively quick campaign against the Boer republics of southern Africa. Instead, they encountered determined resistance. Boer commandos moved swiftly across familiar terrain. Railways were sabotaged. Supply lines attacked. Frustration mounted. Eventually, Britain adopted harsh measures, including the establishment of concentration camps for Boer civilians, where disease claimed thousands of lives, especially women and children. The war ended in British victory. Yet the cost, financially, politically, and morally, proved enormous. Around the world, observers began asking uncomfortable questions. Was the empire truly invincible, or merely very large? There is a difference. Meanwhile, ordinary life within Britain continued changing. Electric streetlights replaced gas lamps. Bicycles appeared on country roads. Photographs became increasingly common. Telephones entered businesses. Music halls entertained crowded audiences. Football clubs attracted passionate supporters. People laughed, married, raised children, complained about the weather. History often focuses on governments. Most people simply focus on tomorrow. Picture an autumn evening in London around 1900. Fog drifts slowly along the Thames. Electric lights shimmer upon wet pavement. A steamship from India unloads tea while another prepares to sail for Australia. Newspapers announce imperial ceremonies attended by Queen Victoria. Inside homes, families gather around fireplaces drinking tea sweetened with Caribbean sugar and stirred with silver imported through imperial trade. It all feels wonderfully permanent. Yet beneath the surface, new powers are quietly rising. Germany builds factories at astonishing speed. The United States grows richer every year. Japan modernizes its military with remarkable determination. Russia expands across Eurasia. The world is changing again. Britain still stands at the very top. But remaining at the top has always been far more difficult than getting there. As Queen Victoria's long reign nears its end, few suspect that the 20th century will challenge the British Empire in ways no previous generation could have imagined. The age of supreme confidence is reaching its sunset. Beyond the horizon, a new century waits, and with it, a war unlike anything humanity has ever seen. The Empire at its zenith. On January 22, 1901, a hush settled over Britain. Church bells rang slowly. Newspapers printed black borders around their pages. Shopkeepers lowered shutters. Across the empire, from the snowy forests of Canada to the humid ports of Singapore, telegraph operators tapped out the same message. Queen Victoria was dead. Queen Victoria. For 63 years she had reigned. Entire generations had never known another monarch. Children born when she first took the throne had become grandparents before her death. To many people, it felt almost as though an age itself had ended. And in many ways, it had. The Victorian era had transformed Britain from a powerful kingdom into the greatest empire the world had ever seen. Factories had multiplied. Railways had spread across continents. Steamships had replaced sailing fleets. The telegraph had conquered distance. London had become the financial center of the globe. By the dawn of the 20th century, the British Empire governed roughly 400 million people, about 1/4 of humanity, and covered nearly 1/4 of the Earth's land surface. No empire before it had ever reached such extraordinary scale. If someone had climbed a hill overlooking London in 1901, they would have seen a city overflowing with confidence. Electric trams rattled through crowded streets. Horse-drawn omnibuses still competed with the first motor cars. Tower Bridge, completed only a few years earlier, opened gracefully for passing ships. Tower Bridge. The Houses of Parliament overlooked the Thames with familiar certainty. The Royal Navy anchored nearby, seemingly unchallengeable. It was easy to believe that this was simply the natural order of the world. History, however, has never been especially interested in preserving anyone's sense of permanence. Victoria's son became King Edward VII. Edward VII. Unlike his famously reserved mother, Edward enjoyed society. He appreciated elegant dinners, fashionable gatherings, diplomacy, and travel. His reign proved relatively short, yet important. Europe's royal families had become astonishingly interconnected. Kings, queens, emperors, and princes were often cousins. Photographs from royal ceremonies resemble enormous family reunions. One might almost imagine that such close relationships would guarantee peace. History politely declined that suggestion. The empire itself had become an intricate web of different kinds of territories. There were self-governing dominions like Canada and Australia. There were crown colonies ruled more directly from London. There were protectorates, princely states, mandates, naval stations, and trading ports. No two places were governed in exactly the same way. Canada increasingly managed its own domestic affairs. Australia had federated into the Commonwealth of Australia in 1901. Commonwealth of Australia. New Zealand followed a similar path. South Africa would soon become a self-governing union after the Bitter Boer War. India remained under direct imperial administration. Egypt occupied a complicated middle ground. Hong Kong functioned as a vital commercial gateway. The empire was less a single country than a vast collection of interconnected worlds. Each possessed its own languages, its own customs, its own hopes, its own grievances. Holding such diversity together required extraordinary effort, and increasingly, extraordinary expense. Meanwhile, technology continued changing everyday life. Wireless radio emerged. Automobiles became more common. Aircraft, though still fragile curiosities, demonstrated astonishing possibilities. The Wright brothers flew at Kitty Hawk in 1903. Orville Wright Wilbur Wright. Many observers dismissed flying machines as entertaining novelties. After all, what practical use could heavier-than-air flight possibly have? History, once again, quietly smiled. Within little more than a decade, airplanes would become instruments of war. Britain remained the world's leading naval power, but new challenges emerged beneath the surface. Germany. Unified only since 1871, the German Empire industrialized with astonishing speed. Its factories rivaled Britain's. Its universities produced brilliant scientists. Its army gained enormous prestige. Most importantly for Britain, Germany began building a modern battle fleet. Admiral Alfred von Tirpitz believed Germany deserved a navy worthy of its growing status. Alfred von Tirpitz. British leaders grew increasingly uneasy. For centuries, Britain's security had depended upon commanding the seas. A rival fleet represented more than military competition. It represented an existential question. What happens to an island empire if it no longer rules the oceans? The response came in steel. In 1906, Britain launched HMS Dreadnought. HMS Dreadnought. The battleship was revolutionary. It carried larger guns, used steam turbines, moved faster than previous capital ships. In one dramatic moment, almost every older battleship in the world became obsolete. Naval architects everywhere sighed deeply. Years of careful work had suddenly become yesterday's technology. Germany immediately accelerated its own shipbuilding. Britain responded. An expensive naval arms race began. Shipyards worked day and night. Steel mills expanded production. Taxpayers paid enormous sums. Newspapers proudly counted battleships almost like sporting scores. One more for Britain. Another for Germany. Far from Europe, imperial life unfolded at its own pace. Imagine a railway station in colonial India around 1910. Steam hisses from a waiting locomotive. Porters weave through crowds balancing luggage upon their heads. Women wearing colorful saris stand beside British officers in tropical uniforms. Merchants negotiate prices. Students carry books printed in English and Bengali. Tea sellers call to passing travelers. The station is noisy, busy, alive. Empire is visible everywhere. Yet so too is India itself. Languages blend together. Religions coexist uneasily. Old traditions continue beneath new institutions. The empire shapes India. India also shapes the empire. Millions of Indian soldiers serve in British forces. Indian civil servants administer vast provinces. Indian lawyers increasingly demand greater political participation. Among them is a young barrister named Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. At this point, few outside limited circles know his name. Mahatma Gandhi. History will remember it. Elsewhere across the empire, similar currents begin flowing. In Ireland, demands for greater self-government intensify. In Egypt, nationalist voices grow louder. In West Africa, educated elites begin discussing constitutional reform. In the Caribbean, intellectuals question racial inequality. In Southeast Asia, newspapers circulate new political ideas. Most movements remain peaceful. Most seek reform rather than immediate independence. But something fundamental is changing. Subjects increasingly wish to become citizens. They appreciate railways, schools, hospitals, modern administration. Yet many also ask a simple question. If Britain speaks so passionately about liberty, why should liberty stop at the edge of Britain itself? Empires rarely enjoy answering that question. Still, on the eve of the First World War, confidence remains overwhelming. International trade reaches unprecedented levels. Steamships cross oceans according to remarkably reliable schedules. Financial markets connect continents. Scientists speak optimistically about progress. Many educated Europeans genuinely believe that major wars have become too economically destructive to occur. Modern civilization, they argue, has outgrown such foolishness. Then, on a warm summer day in June 1914, a young archduke rides through the streets of Sarajevo. A pistol fires. 2 people die. And within weeks, the largest empire in history finds itself marching toward the greatest catastrophe the modern world has yet known. As darkness settles over London, the clocks continue ticking. Steamships still depart the docks. Telegraph operators continue sending messages. Children continue practicing lessons for tomorrow's school. No one knows that tomorrow's lessons will soon be interrupted by recruitment posters, casualty lists, ration books, and telegrams carrying unbearable news. The empire has reached its highest point. The view from the summit is magnificent. It is also the place where the descent quietly begins. The war that changed everything. There is a particular kind of silence that exists just before a storm. The birds stop singing. The wind seems to hesitate. Clouds gather so slowly that no one notices them until the sunlight has already disappeared. Europe in the summer of 1914 felt much the same. Looking backward, the signs appear obvious. Military alliances, naval rivalries, nationalist movements, an arms race unlike anything the world had witnessed before. Yet to the ordinary people living through those warm July afternoons, life still seemed reassuringly familiar. Children chased one another through city parks. Steam trains departed exactly on schedule. Markets filled with fresh bread and vegetables. Ships continued crossing the Atlantic with tourists dressed in linen suits and elegant hats. Most people expected tomorrow to resemble yesterday. History had other plans. On June 28, 1914, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, was assassinated while visiting Sarajevo. Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria. The event itself shocked Europe. But political assassinations were not entirely uncommon. Many observers assumed the crisis would eventually fade. Instead, alliances that had been carefully built over decades began pulling entire nations toward war like enormous gears suddenly locking together. Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. Russia mobilized. Germany declared war on Russia and France. German armies marched through Belgium. Britain had guaranteed Belgian neutrality since the 19th century. On August 4, 1914, Britain declared war on Germany. United Kingdom. Crowds gathered outside Buckingham Palace. Many cheered. Bands played patriotic songs. Young men volunteered with remarkable enthusiasm. Some imagined the adventure would be over by Christmas. It is difficult to blame them. Almost every previous European war had been relatively short. No one yet understood what industrialized warfare truly meant. The declaration transformed a European conflict into something far larger. The British Empire entered the war together. Almost overnight, troops began assembling from every corner of the globe. Canadians crossed the Atlantic. Australians sailed from the Pacific. New Zealanders followed. South Africans volunteered. West Indians enlisted. Africans served in labor corps and military units. Most significantly of all, more than 1 million Indian soldiers would eventually serve overseas during the war. British Indian Army. Imagine the docks at Bombay in late 1914. Steamships wait patiently beneath the tropical sun. Families crowd the quays. Mothers embrace sons. Children cling to fathers in unfamiliar uniforms. Priests offer blessings. Friends promise to write letters. The ship's whistles echo across the harbor. Ropes are cast off. Slowly, the vessels disappear toward horizons few of the departing soldiers have ever imagined. Some are traveling farther from home than anyone in their families ever has. Many will never return. The Western Front soon became the defining image of the war. Stretching hundreds of miles across France and Belgium, trenches scarred the countryside like enormous wounds. Imagine arriving there in November. Rain falls steadily. Mud reaches your knees. Sandbags sag beneath constant moisture. Rats grow astonishingly fat on abandoned food and unburied bodies. The smell? It is almost impossible to describe. Wet earth, Smoke. Rotting timber. Unwashed clothing. Cordite from exploding shells. Death. Always death lingering somewhere nearby. A soldier writes in his diary by candlelight. His handwriting grows increasingly uneven as the paper becomes damp. He describes missing home. Tea. Dry socks. His mother's cooking. Ordinary things become extraordinary when they disappear. Above the trench, machine guns chatter. Artillery shells scream overhead. Then comes another whistle. Another order to climb the ladder. Another advance across open ground. History remembers famous battles. The soldiers often remembered simply surviving until breakfast. The empire fought everywhere. In Belgium, France, East Africa, Mesopotamia, the Dardanelles, the Middle East, the seas, the skies, even beneath the oceans, where submarines introduced terrifying new forms of warfare. One of the most ambitious campaigns unfolded on the Gallipoli Peninsula in 1915. British, Australian, New Zealand, French, and other Allied troops attempted to force the Dardanelles and capture Constantinople. Gallipoli Peninsula. The plan looked convincing on maps. Maps have a tendency to hide cliffs, machine gun positions, rocky beaches, heat, flies, disease. The landings quickly became nightmares. Imagine the first boats approaching shore before dawn. Water splashes against wooden hulls. The rising sun silhouettes steep ridges. Then gunfire erupts. Men leap into waist-deep water carrying rifles held above their heads. Some never reach the beach. Others do. Only to discover that climbing the cliffs under enemy fire proves nearly impossible. Months of fighting follow. Little ground changes hands. Thousands die. Eventually, the campaign ends in evacuation. A failure. Yet Gallipoli becomes foundational to the national identities of Australia and New Zealand, whose soldiers, the Anzacs, earned enduring reputations for courage under impossible conditions. Australian and New Zealand Army Corps. Indian soldiers experienced equally remarkable journeys. Many arrived in Europe expecting warm climates. Instead, they encountered freezing winters unlike anything they had known. Imagine a Sikh cavalryman standing in northern France. Snow falls gently around him. His breath forms clouds in the cold morning air. Church bells ring in distant villages. He looks across unfamiliar fields toward enemy trenches while remembering the warmth of Punjab. Letters home describe the strange landscape, the endless mud, the foreign languages, the bitter cold. Yet they also describe comradeship, curiosity, resilience. History sometimes forgets how international this war truly was. The British Empire could not have fought it without its colonies. At sea, the Royal Navy enforced a vast blockade against Germany. Food shortages gradually weakened the Central Powers. German submarines responded by attacking merchant shipping. In 1915, the passenger liner RMS Lusitania was sunk by a German U-boat. RMS Lusitania. Nearly 1,200 people died. The tragedy shocked international opinion and intensified debates over unrestricted submarine warfare. The oceans, once symbols of imperial security, had become battlefields themselves. Meanwhile, the war transformed everyday life within Britain. Factories shifted from producing consumer goods to producing shells, rifles, uniforms, and aircraft. Women entered workplaces in unprecedented numbers. Imagine a munitions factory in 1916. Rows of women wearing protective clothing carefully assemble artillery shells. The air smells of oil and chemicals. Machines roar continuously. Many workers labor 12-hour shifts. Some develop yellow-stained skin from exposure to explosives. They jokingly call themselves canary girls. Humor becomes one way of surviving fear. Elsewhere, children collect scrap metal. Families plant vegetable gardens. Food prices rise. Rationing gradually becomes familiar. Almost every household knows someone serving overseas. Almost every street receives telegrams announcing casualties. The war no longer belongs only to soldiers. Entire societies fight it. Then came July 1st, 1916, the opening day of the Battle of the Somme. Battle of the Somme. British commanders believed a week-long artillery bombardment had destroyed German defenses. Many soldiers were instructed to advance at walking pace. The shells had not accomplished everything expected. German machine guns survived. When whistles blew that morning, thousands climbed from their trenches. Within hours, nearly 60,000 British casualties had been suffered, including around 19,000 dead. It remains the bloodiest day in the history of the British Army. Imagine evening falling across the battlefield. Smoke drifts over shattered trees. Stretchers move silently through the mud. Some men call softly for water. Others no longer speak at all. The sun sets exactly as it always has. Nature remains strangely indifferent to human tragedy. The empire eventually prevailed. Not quickly, not easily, but through endurance. Its industries continued producing weapons. Its merchant fleets continued sailing. Its colonies continued supplying men, food, animals, raw materials, and money. Then, in 1917, another enormous shift occurred. The United States entered the war on the Allied side. United States. Fresh troops. Fresh industry. Fresh financial resources. The balance gradually shifted. Germany launched one final offensive in 1918. It failed. The First World War was over. The crowd celebrated. Church bells rang once more. Strangers embraced in the streets. Soldiers dreamed of going home. Yet beneath the relief lay another emotion. Exhaustion. The British Empire had won, but it had paid a staggering price. Nearly every town across Britain, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, India, and countless other parts of the empire carried memories of names carved onto memorials. The empire emerged larger than ever, gaining former German and Ottoman territories under League of Nations mandates. On maps, it looked stronger. In reality, something fundamental had changed. The war had drained Britain's finances. It had shaken confidence in European superiority. Millions of colonial soldiers had fought for the empire. Many now began asking a difficult question. If we were good enough to fight for freedom, were we not also good enough to govern ourselves? That quiet question would echo across the 20th century. And no empire, however vast, could silence it forever. The cracks beneath the crown. When the guns finally fell silent in November 1918, Europe did not awaken into peace. It awakened into exhaustion. The kind of exhaustion that settles deep into bones. Cities remained standing, yet they felt older. Railway stations still echoed with arriving trains, but many passengers stepped onto the platforms carrying empty sleeves instead of arms. Church bells rang again. Children laughed again. Markets reopened. Life returned. But it returned differently. The First World War had not simply changed borders. It had changed how millions of people understood power itself. The British Empire emerged victorious. On paper, it stood larger than ever. Through the League of Nations, Britain acquired mandates over former German and Ottoman territories, including Palestine, Iraq, and Tanganyika. Mandatory Palestine, mandatory Iraq, Tanganyika territory. The maps glowed red with even greater confidence. Yet maps can be deceptive. They measure land, not stability. The empire had won the greatest war in history, but it had spent much of its strength doing so. Imagine London in 1919. Victory parades have ended. The flags are folded away. Thousands of soldiers return home expecting the country they left behind. Instead, they find unemployment, housing shortages, factories struggling to shift back to peacetime production. Many carry invisible wounds. Nightmares wake them before dawn. Loud noises cause sudden panic. Doctors have only begun trying to understand what people later call post-traumatic stress. At the time, many simply describe it as shell shock. Some men receive sympathy. Others receive suspicion. History has often been kinder to metals than to minds. The war had also changed the relationship between Britain and its colonies. More than 1 million Indian soldiers had served overseas. Hundreds of thousands of Africans had worked as carriers, laborers, engineers, and soldiers. Canadians had fought at Vimy Ridge. Battle of Vimy Ridge. Australians and New Zealanders had endured Gallipoli. South Africans had fought in Africa and Europe. Every part of the empire had sacrificed. Many people believed those sacrifices would lead to greater political rights. Some reforms arrived. Many did not. Expectations rose faster than governments were willing to respond. That gap between hope and reality would become one of the defining tensions of the 20th century. Nowhere was that tension more visible than in India. During the war, many Indian leaders had supported Britain, believing loyalty would be rewarded with meaningful self-government afterward. Instead, the British government extended emergency wartime powers through legislation such as the Rollout Acts of 1919, allowing detention without trial in certain cases. Rollout Acts. The laws angered many Indians. Peaceful protests spread. Meetings filled public squares. Newspapers criticized the government. People who had remained loyal throughout the war began questioning Britain's promises. Then came one of the darkest days in imperial history. It was April 13th, 1919. The festival of Baisakhi filled the city of Amritsar with visitors. Amritsar. Families gathered. Merchants sold food. Children ran through crowded streets. Many people also assembled inside Jallianwala Bagh, a walled public garden, to protest peacefully against recent arrests. Jallianwala Bagh. The gathering included men, women, children. Some came for politics. Others simply happened to be nearby during the holiday. British Brigadier General Reginald Dyer arrived with soldiers. Reginald Dyer. Without ordering the crowd to disperse through the exits, his troops opened fire. The shooting continued for around 10 minutes. Hundreds were killed. Many more were wounded. Some desperately jumped into wells trying to escape bullets. Imagine the silence afterward. The festival music has stopped. Dust hangs motionless in the afternoon air. Shoes lie scattered across the ground. Parents search desperately for children. Friends call names that receive no answer. History sometimes compresses such events into a single sentence. Those who lived through them carried the memory forever. News of the massacre spread rapidly across India. Shock turned into anger. Anger into determination. Even people who had previously believed cooperation with British rule remained possible began losing faith. One poet, Rabindranath Tagore, renounced the knighthood that Britain had awarded him, declaring he could not accept such an honor after the massacre. Rabindranath Tagore. Among those deeply affected was a lawyer who had recently returned from South Africa, Mohandas Gandhi. Soon known simply as Mahatma Gandhi, he reached a profound conclusion. Britain possessed overwhelming military strength. Meeting violence with violence would likely end in disaster. Instead, he proposed something astonishing. Defeat an empire without firing a shot. Gandhi's philosophy of nonviolent resistance, or satyagraha, puzzled many observers at first. Mahatma Gandhi. How could refusing to cooperate possibly challenge the largest empire on earth? Yet millions listened. They boycotted British goods, spun their own cloth, refused certain government positions, joined peaceful marches, accepted imprisonment rather than surrendering their principles. Imagine one of Gandhi's meetings. No military band, no weapons, no grand palace. Just thousands of ordinary people sitting quietly beneath the open sky. Farmers, teachers, merchants, students, women carrying children, old men leaning on walking sticks, listening. The power of the movement lay not in force, but in numbers. Empires can imprison leaders. Imprisoning millions becomes considerably more complicated. Britain found itself confronting a challenge unlike any it had previously faced. Traditional rebellions could be met with armies, naval blockades, fortifications. But what happens when your opponent refuses to fight in conventional ways? What happens when newspapers around the world begin printing photographs of peaceful demonstrators being arrested? What happens when the empire's own language of justice and liberty is turned back upon it? The questions became increasingly uncomfortable. Ireland posed another enormous challenge. For centuries, Ireland had occupied a deeply complicated place within the British state. Many Irish people sought greater autonomy. Some demanded complete independence. After the Easter Rising of 1916 and the subsequent Irish War of Independence, negotiations eventually produced the Irish Free State in 1922, while 6 counties in the northeast remained part of the United Kingdom as Northern Ireland, Irish Free State. For Britain, it represented a profound moment. One of the oldest parts of its imperial story had fundamentally changed. The empire had not merely lost distant colonies before. Now it had lost much of an island just across the Irish Sea. Meanwhile, the wider world continued evolving. Japan emerged stronger after the First World War. The United States became the world's largest economy. The Soviet Union appeared after the Russian Revolution, offering an entirely different political vision. Britain remained immensely powerful, yet for the first time in generations, it no longer stood alone at the summit. Other powers climbed steadily upward. Economic competition intensified. Military planning became more complex. Diplomats worked constantly to preserve an increasingly fragile international order. Then came another blow, one that no army could defeat. In 1929, financial markets collapsed. The Great Depression spread across the world. Great Depression. Banks failed. Businesses closed. International trade shrank dramatically. Unemployment rose across Britain and throughout the empire. Imagine the London docks. Warehouses once overflowing with imported goods now sit strangely quiet. Ships remain tied to their moorings. Dockworkers wait for jobs that never arrive. Tea still grows in India. Wool still comes from Australia. Rubber still leaves Malaya. But buyers become scarce. Even the greatest empire cannot escape a global economic storm. And yet, despite every warning sign, despite unrest in India, despite Irish independence, despite economic crisis, despite growing rivals abroad, many still believed the British Empire would endure indefinitely. After all, it had survived Napoleon. It had survived rebellion. It had survived World War. Surely it could survive anything. The empire still possessed the world's largest navy. Its financial institutions remained influential. Its territories stretched across every continent. Its confidence, though shaken, had not disappeared. But history rarely destroys great powers in a single dramatic moment. Instead, it weakens them gradually, then introduces a crisis so overwhelming that all previous cracks suddenly widen at once. That crisis would arrive in September 1939, the Second World War. A conflict even more destructive than the first. A war that would save freedom in Europe, while quietly ending the British Empire itself. As the evening settles over London once again, fog drifts across the Thames. The lamps glow softly against the mist. Far away, Gandhi walks peacefully through an Indian village. Irish politicians debate the future of their young state. German factories begin producing weapons once more. The world seems calm enough. But beneath that calm, the gears of history are turning again. The empire's finest hour. There are moments in history when entire civilizations seem to pause. The clocks continue ticking. The rain continues falling. Ships continue crossing familiar waters. Yet everyone senses that the next decision may determine the fate of generations. Britain entered September 1939 in precisely such a moment. Walk through London on the evening before the declaration of war. Office workers hurry toward railway stations. Children chase pigeons through Trafalgar Square. Newspapers sell briskly from street corners. The smell of roasted chestnuts drifts through the cool autumn air. Everything feels strangely ordinary. Almost stubbornly so. People continue discussing football scores, weather forecasts, family birthdays. They have lived through one world war already. Surely humanity has learned its lesson. History, unfortunately, has never been especially good at learning from itself. During the 20 years following the First World War, Europe had drifted steadily toward another catastrophe. The Treaty of Versailles ended the fighting in 1919, but it did not create lasting peace. Treaty of Versailles. Germany struggled with economic hardship, political instability, and deep resentment over the treaty's terms. The Great Depression made matters worse. Millions lost their jobs. Faith in democratic governments weakened. Extremist movements promised simple answers to painfully complicated problems. Among those movements rose a former Austrian soldier whose speeches grew increasingly impossible to ignore. Adolf Hitler. By 1933, he had become Chancellor of Germany. Within a few years, democracy had largely disappeared. Political opponents were imprisoned. The press was controlled. The military expanded. The Nazi regime openly rejected many of the post-war agreements that had shaped Europe. At first, each concession, however, encouraged another demand. Austria, then the Sudetenland, then the rest of Czechoslovakia. Finally, Poland. On September 1st, 1939, German forces invaded Poland. 2 days later, Britain and France declared war. The Second World War had begun. Unlike the previous conflict, this war threatened Britain almost immediately. Within months, much of Western Europe collapsed. Denmark, Norway, Belgium, the Netherlands, Luxembourg. Then, astonishingly, France. One of Europe's greatest military powers surrendered in June 1940 after only weeks of fighting. Suddenly, Britain stood almost alone. Across the English Channel stretched a coastline now controlled largely by Nazi Germany. Many believed invasion was inevitable. Imagine standing on the white cliffs of Dover during those anxious weeks. The sea appears deceptively peaceful. Fishing boats move quietly across calm water. Gulls circle overhead. Yet everyone knows that somewhere beyond the horizon, armies prepare. Children collect seashells on beaches where soldiers now lay barbed wire. Road signs disappear so invading troops cannot use them. Village greens become training grounds. Public parks fill with anti-aircraft guns. An entire nation quietly prepares itself for the possibility of occupation. During Britain's darkest hour, a new prime minister took office. Winston Churchill. Churchill possessed an extraordinary gift for language. His speeches did not promise easy victory. Quite the opposite. In his first address to Parliament as Prime Minister, he famously declared that he had nothing to offer except blood, toil, tears, and sweat. Not exactly the sort of slogan one might choose for a cheerful advertising campaign. Yet people believed him. Because he acknowledged the danger without surrendering hope. His speeches became weapons of a different kind. They strengthened morale when military victories remained painfully scarce. Then came the Battle of Britain. Hitler understood that invading Britain required control of the skies. The German Luftwaffe launched enormous air attacks against British airfields, factories, ports, and eventually cities. Luftwaffe, the Royal Air Force, though smaller, fought back relentlessly. Royal Air Force. Imagine a summer morning in southern England. The warning sirens begin. Children stop playing. Factory workers glance upward. Then the distant hum of aircraft grows louder. Tiny black specks appear against brilliant blue skies. Within moments, they become fighters and bombers weaving through white clouds. Machine guns chatter. Engines roar. Smoke trails mark desperate turns high above green fields. From the ground, the battle seems almost beautiful, until burning aircraft begin falling. The pilots were astonishingly young, many barely older than university students. Some flew several missions every day. Exhaustion became constant. Churchill later praised them with words that echoed across generations. Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few. Britain survived. The invasion never came. It was Hitler's first major strategic defeat. Unable to gain control of the skies, Germany shifted strategy. The Blitz began. Night after night, bombers crossed the Channel and attacked British cities. London suffered most heavily. Imagine the capital after sunset. Streetlights are extinguished, windows covered. The city disappears into darkness. Families hurry underground into stations of the London Underground, carrying blankets, books, sandwiches, and children half asleep in their parents' arms. London Underground. Trains stop running. Platforms become temporary bedrooms. Someone quietly plays a harmonica. A mother reads bedtime stories while distant explosions shake the tunnels. Dust falls gently from the ceiling. Above ground, historic streets burn. St. Paul's Cathedral stands surrounded by smoke, becoming an enduring symbol of resilience. Morning arrives. People climb the station stairs. Entire blocks have vanished. Yet buses resume service. Shops reopen. Tea is brewed. The determination to continue ordinary life becomes a form of resistance. The empire fought far beyond Britain itself. Canadian factories produced aircraft, trucks, and ammunition. Australian forces battled in North Africa and the Pacific. New Zealand soldiers fought in Greece, Crete, and Italy. Indian troops served in North Africa, East Africa, Italy, Burma, and the Middle East. By the end of the war, more than 2.5 million volunteers had served in the British Indian Army, the largest volunteer force in history. British Indian Army. Imagine an Indian soldier in the deserts of North Africa. The sand stretches endlessly beneath a burning sun. The wind carries grains that settle into every fold of clothing. He fights beside Scots, Australians, South Africans, New Zealanders, and Englishmen. Different languages. Different religions. Different homes. United by one war. The empire has become an army. At sea, another desperate struggle unfolded. German submarines attempted to cut Britain's supply lines across the Atlantic. Without imported food, oil, and raw materials, Britain could not survive. Convoys crossed dangerous waters escorted by destroyers and corvettes. Merchant sailors faced extraordinary risks. Imagine a cargo ship crossing the North Atlantic in winter. Towering waves crash across the deck. Ice forms on railings. The horizon disappears beneath gray skies. Every shadow in the water might conceal a submarine. Every explosion might be the last. Thousands of merchant seamen never returned home. Their courage receives less attention than famous generals. Yet without them, the war would have been lost. Then, on December 7, 1941, the world changed once again. Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor. The United States entered the war. For Britain, American involvement represented both relief and quiet realization. The empire no longer fought as the world's dominant power. It now depended heavily upon an ally whose industrial strength soon surpassed its own. American factories produced astonishing quantities of ships, aircraft, tanks, and supplies. The balance of global power had begun shifting across the Atlantic. The war also reached Asia with terrifying speed. Japan captured Hong Kong, Singapore, and Burma in rapid succession. Hong Kong, Singapore, Burma. The fall of Singapore in February 1942 shocked Britain. For decades it had been described as an impregnable fortress. Instead, it surrendered after only a week of fighting. The myth of imperial invincibility suffered a devastating blow. Across Asia, millions watched European armies retreat. Many drew an unavoidable conclusion. If Britain could be defeated, perhaps it could also be replaced. Nationalist movements grew stronger. The old certainties weakened. By 1945, Britain stood among the victorious powers. Nazi Germany had surrendered. Japan had surrendered after the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki and the Soviet declaration of war. The Second World War was over. Crowds filled London's streets on Victory in Europe Day. Church bells rang once more. Strangers danced in Trafalgar Square. Flags waved. Children laughed. After 6 years of fear, relief finally arrived. Yet beneath the celebration lay a quieter truth. Britain had won. The empire had survived, but victory had come at an enormous cost. The nation was deeply in debt. Many cities required rebuilding. Millions mourned lost family members. And across Asia, Africa, and the Middle East, colonial subjects who had fought beside Britain increasingly expected something in return. Not medals. Not speeches. Freedom. The greatest victory in the empire's history had also accelerated its decline. The sun still shone across territories colored red on the map. But now, the sunset had become impossible to ignore. The sunset of the empire. If the British Empire had reached its dawn beneath the sails of wooden ships, its sunset arrived beneath the wings of airplanes. The world that emerged from the Second World War no longer resembled the one Britain had dominated for more than a century. The oceans were still there. The trade routes still crossed familiar waters. London still stood upon the Thames. Buckingham Palace still overlooked its crowds. The Union Jack still flew above government buildings from the Caribbean to the Pacific. Yet something invisible had changed. Power itself had changed. For centuries, the British Empire had relied upon 3 great advantages: the Royal Navy, industrial wealth, and the belief, shared by much of the world, that Britain would always remain one of history's leading powers. After 1945, all three began to weaken. Not overnight. Not dramatically. But steadily. Like the tide slipping quietly away from a shoreline. Walk through London in the autumn of 1945. Victory banners have mostly disappeared. Bomb sites remain everywhere. Entire neighborhoods are still piles of broken brick and twisted steel. Children play among ruins that would have seemed unimaginable only a decade earlier. Builders measure foundations for new homes. Women queue patiently with ration books. Tea remains scarce. Sugar is carefully counted. Meat is limited. It seems strange. The victors often imagine that winning a war brings immediate prosperity. Instead, Britain entered years of austerity. The war had cost almost everything. The nation owed enormous debts, especially to the United States. Factories required rebuilding. Railways needed repair. Merchant fleets had to be replaced. Even maintaining the empire itself had become painfully expensive. The mathematics no longer worked. An empire spread across every continent required soldiers, civil servants, warships, railways, ports, airfields, telegraph systems, governments. Every one of them demanded money. Money Britain increasingly lacked. Meanwhile, another transformation quietly unfolded. The United States and the Soviet Union emerged from the war as the world's two superpowers. Washington, Moscow. The center of global politics shifted away from London. Britain remained influential. Its diplomats still carried enormous respect. Its scientists remained world-class. Its armed forces remained formidable. Yet it no longer dictated international affairs as it once had. For perhaps the first time since the defeat of Napoleon, Britain found itself adapting to a world designed by others. That realization proved surprisingly difficult. Empires, after all, rarely imagine retirement. Nowhere did these changes matter more than India. For decades, the independence movement had grown stronger. The Second World War accelerated everything. Many Indian leaders questioned Britain's decision to involve India in the conflict without consulting elected Indian representatives. In 1942, the Quit India movement demanded immediate independence. Quit India movement. Thousands were arrested, including Gandhi, including Jawaharlal Nehru. Yet imprisonment no longer ended the movement. Too many people now believed independence inevitable. Imagine a village meeting somewhere in northern India during the final years of the war. Lanterns flicker beneath banyan trees. Teachers discuss politics alongside farmers. Women who once remained silent during public meetings now speak openly. Young students debate constitutional reform. Old veterans remember fighting for Britain overseas. Someone asks quietly, "If we fought for freedom in Europe, why not here?" No one has an easy answer. By 1947, the British government accepted that imperial rule in India could not continue indefinitely. The challenge became not whether Britain would leave, but how. Unfortunately, history rarely grants simple endings. Tensions between the Indian National Congress and the All India Muslim League had intensified. Indian National Congress, All India Muslim League. Religious violence spread across parts of the country. Negotiations became increasingly urgent. The decision was made to partition British India into two independent states, India and Pakistan. The midnight of August 14th to 15th, 1947, became one of the most extraordinary moments of the 20th century. In New Delhi, celebrations filled the streets. The Indian tricolor rose above government buildings. Crowds cheered. Fireworks illuminated the night sky. Jawaharlal Nehru delivered his famous Tryst with Destiny speech to the Constituent Assembly. He spoke of awakening to life and freedom. Thousands listened with tears in their eyes. After nearly 2 centuries of British rule, India was independent. It should have been a moment of pure celebration. Instead, it also became one of profound tragedy. Partition triggered one of the largest migrations in human history. Imagine a railway station in Punjab during those terrible weeks. The platform is impossibly crowded. Families clutch bundles containing everything they own. Infants cry. Old people sit silently upon wooden trunks. The trains arrive. Some are so full that passengers cling to the roofs. Others arrive carrying only silence. Communal violence between Hindus, Muslims, and Sikhs spread across the region. Villages that had lived together for generations suddenly divided. Neighbors became strangers. Strangers became enemies. Historians estimate that around 10 to 15 million people crossed the new borders, while perhaps 1 million or more died during the violence. It remains one of the greatest human tragedies accompanying the end of empire. Freedom arrived. Peace did not arrive immediately with it. For Britain, India's independence represented far more than the loss of one colony. It represented the end of the imperial system's very center. The jewel in the crown was gone. Without India, the empire could no longer function in the same way. The psychological impact proved almost as significant as the political one. If India could become independent, why not everyone else? That question soon echoed across Asia, across Africa, across the Caribbean, across the Middle East. Burma became independent in 1948. Myanmar. So did Ceylon, today's Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka. Palestine became another deeply complicated crisis. Britain, exhausted and unable to reconcile competing national aspirations, ended its mandate in 1948. The creation of the State of Israel and the First Arab-Israeli War followed almost immediately. State of Israel. Across the empire, one territory after another demanded constitutional reform. The old world was dissolving, not because Britain suddenly became weak, but because the world itself had changed. National self-determination had become one of the defining political ideas of the 20th century. The age of formal empire was ending. At home, Britain also changed. The government established the National Health Service in 1948. National Health Service. New housing projects replaced bombed neighborhoods. Education expanded. The welfare state grew. Political attention increasingly shifted inward. Rather than governing distant territories, Britain focused on rebuilding itself. For ordinary families, this mattered far more than imperial maps. Parents wanted schools, hospitals, jobs, peace. The empire gradually became yesterday's story. Yet one final imperial crisis still lay ahead. In 1956, events in Egypt would reveal, more clearly than anything before, that Britain was no longer capable of acting alone on the world stage. The Suez Crisis would become the moment many historians identify as the symbolic end of Britain as a global imperial superpower. The empire had survived rebellions, world wars, economic collapse. It would not survive changing geopolitics. As this evening's chapter draws gently to a close, imagine the Union Jack being lowered quietly over government buildings in Delhi. The flag does not fall. It is folded carefully, respectfully. Another flag rises beside cheering crowds. The morning sun shines upon both. History rarely ends with triumph or defeat alone. More often, it simply changes hands. The British Empire is still alive. But now, for the first time in centuries, everyone can see the horizon where the sun is beginning to set. Suez, decolonization, and the last days of the British Empire. There are moments when history announces itself with trumpets. A king is crowned. A declaration of war is read aloud. A flag is raised over a newly conquered city. Then there are quieter moments. A telephone call between distant capitals. A meeting around a polished conference table. A diplomatic note delivered in careful language. No cheering crowds. No battlefield. No dramatic music. And yet, those quieter moments sometimes change the world far more completely than any battle ever could. For the British Empire, one of those moments arrived in the autumn of 1956. Many historians describe it as the moment Britain finally realized that it no longer stood at the center of global power. Not because its soldiers lacked courage, not because its people lacked determination, but because history itself had moved on. To understand Suez, let us return for a moment to that narrow ribbon of water first opened in 1869. The Suez Canal had long been one of the empire's most valuable lifelines. Suez Canal. Imagine standing on its banks just after sunrise. The desert glows pale gold. A light wind stirs the sand. Then, slowly, A massive cargo ship appears on the horizon. It moves almost silently through the still water. Behind it follows another. And another. Oil from the Persian Gulf. Rubber from Malaya. Tea from Ceylon. Manufactured goods from Britain. The canal had shortened the journey between Europe and Asia by thousands of miles. For nearly a century, it had functioned like one of the empire's great arteries. Control the canal, and you influenced global trade. Lose influence there, and the empire's reach became far more complicated. After the Second World War, Egypt increasingly sought to control its own affairs. The British military presence, once accepted by many as part of imperial strategy, came to symbolize foreign domination. A new generation of Egyptian leaders wanted something different. Among them rose a charismatic army officer, Gamal Abdel Nasser. Gamal Abdel Nasser. Nasser believed Egypt should chart its own future. He championed Arab nationalism. He rejected continued European influence. He possessed remarkable confidence. Sometimes confidence changes history simply by refusing to step aside. In July 1956, Nasser made an astonishing announcement. Egypt would nationalize the Suez Canal Company. The canal itself would remain open to international shipping, but its ownership would pass into Egyptian hands. Across Britain, politicians reacted with alarm. For generations, British governments had regarded Suez almost as an extension of Britain's own strategic lifeline. Some believed losing influence there would weaken Britain's position throughout the Middle East. Others feared the decision would encourage further challenges across the remaining empire. Prime Minister Anthony Eden viewed Nasser as a dangerous threat who had to be confronted. Anthony Eden. The situation escalated rapidly. Britain and France secretly coordinated with Israel. The plan was remarkably ambitious. Israel would invade Egypt across the Sinai Peninsula. Britain and France would then intervene, claiming they needed to separate the two sides and protect the canal. On paper, it looked clever. History often smiles politely at clever plans. Reality has a habit of being less cooperative. Imagine the cabinet room in London. Heavy curtains soften the afternoon light. Maps cover the large wooden table. Military officers discuss troop movements. Diplomats weigh possible international reactions. Every decision feels urgent. Every hour seems important. Many around the table remember Britain's victories during the Second World War. Surely the nation still possesses enough prestige to shape events in the Middle East. Surely. That single word, surely, has accompanied many of history's greatest miscalculations. The military campaign itself progressed relatively quickly. Israeli forces advanced into Sinai. British and French aircraft attacked Egyptian positions. Paratroopers landed near the canal. Professional soldiers carried out their duties with considerable skill. But military success no longer guaranteed political success. This was no longer the 19th century. The world had changed. Television cameras carried images across continents. International organizations exerted growing influence. Most importantly, Britain could no longer ignore the wishes of its closest ally, the United States. President Dwight D. Eisenhower strongly opposed the invasion. Dwight D. Eisenhower. Washington feared the operation would damage Western credibility during the Cold War and push newly independent nations closer to the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union also condemned the intervention. Suddenly, Britain found itself criticized by both superpowers. An uncomfortable position indeed. Economic pressure followed. The British pound came under intense strain. Financial markets grew nervous. American support failed to materialize. Without that support, Britain faced an increasingly painful choice: continue the operation or withdraw. The withdrawal came quickly. To many observers, it was shocking. Britain had not suffered military defeat. Its forces remained effective. Yet diplomacy and economics proved stronger than battlefield victories. The Suez Crisis revealed a truth that could no longer be ignored. Britain remained an important world power, but it was no longer the world's leading imperial power. That era had ended. No official ceremony announced the change. No flag descended. Yet historians often point to Suez as the symbolic conclusion of Britain's imperial century. Across Africa, winds of change accelerated. Imagine a classroom in Accra during the late 1950s. Young students study geography from maps that still show vast colonial territories. Their teacher pauses. He explains that history is changing outside those classroom windows. Soon, those maps will require new colors. In 1957, the Gold Coast became Ghana, the first sub-Saharan African colony of the British Empire to achieve independence in the post-war period. Ghana. Crowds celebrated in the streets. Drums echoed late into the night. For many Africans, Ghana represented more than one country's freedom. It represented possibility. If one colony could become independent, others could too. And they did. The 1960s transformed the political map of Africa. Nigeria became independent in 1960. Nigeria. Sierra Leone followed in 1961. Sierra Leone. Uganda in 1962. Uganda. Kenya in 1963 after years of conflict, including the violent Mau Mau emergency. Kenya. Zambia. Malawi. Botswana. Lesotho. One after another. Flags changed. National anthems changed. Governments changed. The empire that had once expanded almost every year now seemed to shrink with remarkable speed. Curiously, there was remarkably little appetite in Britain to reverse the process. The age of conquest had faded. Most people wished simply to build stable futures. Not every transition proved peaceful. Cyprus experienced bitter conflict. In Palestine, the consequences of the end of the British Mandate continued to shape the Middle East. In Malaya, communist insurgents challenged British authority during the Malayan Emergency, a conflict that lasted from 1948 to 1960. Malayan Emergency. In Kenya, the Mau Mau uprising left deep scars among both colonial authorities and Kenyan communities. History rarely offers perfectly peaceful endings. Empires leave complicated legacies. So do independence movements. Every nation carried its own story, its own triumphs, its own tragedies. Back in Britain, daily life quietly continued. Children watched television after school. Motor cars became increasingly common. Rock and roll crossed the Atlantic. The Beatles emerged from Liverpool in the early 1960s and soon became global icons. The Beatles. The country gradually stopped thinking of itself primarily as an empire. Instead, Britain increasingly imagined itself as a modern European nation with global connections rather than global possessions. That psychological transition may have been the greatest change of all. For centuries, imperial identity had shaped politics, education, trade, and national imagination. Now a new identity slowly took its place. Yet despite the end of formal empire, connections endured. Former colonies remained linked through trade. Migration reshaped Britain itself. Families from India, Pakistan, the Caribbean, Africa, and elsewhere settled in British cities. Walk through London by the late 1960s. The accents have multiplied. Restaurants serve curries alongside fish and chips. Caribbean music drifts from open windows. Markets sell spices once considered exotic. The empire is disappearing politically, but culturally, it is returning home. History has an elegant sense of irony. The empire once carried Britain to the world. Now the world was coming to Britain. As evening settles over the Thames once more, the old imperial maps begin disappearing from classroom walls. Children learn new names, new countries, new flags. The great red expanse that once covered so much of the globe has faded into dozens of independent nations. The empire is almost gone. Only a handful of overseas territories remain. Yet its story is far from over. Because even after an empire ends, its language, its laws, its railways, its borders, its institutions, and its memories continue shaping the lives of billions. In our final chapter, we will step back from the maps and battles to ask one last quiet question. What did the British Empire leave behind? And why does its shadow still stretch across the modern world? The empire's long shadow. It is a curious thing about empires. They do not simply disappear. Cities can burn. Palaces can crumble. Flags can be lowered. Governments can dissolve. Yet an empire has a habit of lingering in quieter places, in the words people speak, in the railway tracks crossing distant plains, in legal books sitting quietly upon courtroom shelves, in cricket matches played on warm afternoons thousands of miles from England, in afternoon cups of tea, in borders drawn long ago by hands that never expected those lines to survive for centuries. History rarely leaves clean endings. Instead, it leaves echoes. Tonight, as our journey reaches its final miles, let us walk through those echoes together, slowly, without rushing. Because the story of the British Empire did not truly end when the last colonies gained independence. In many ways, it simply entered a different chapter. Imagine opening a modern atlas. The familiar sea routes remain. The continents have not moved. The Himalayas still rise above the clouds. The Nile still winds through Egypt. The Thames still flows beneath Westminster Bridge. Yet almost every country once colored red now possesses its own flag, its own parliament, its own anthem, its own dreams. The empire that once governed nearly 1/4 of humanity has become history. And yet, more than 2.5 billion people today live in countries that were once, at some point, part of the British Empire. That is an astonishing legacy. Few historical events have touched so many lives across so many continents. Walk through a courtroom in India. The judge wears robes inspired by British legal tradition. Arguments unfold according to procedures shaped during the colonial period, though transformed and adapted over decades of independent governance. Now visit Australia, Canada, New Zealand, Singapore. Many legal principles trace part of their history to English common law. Each nation has developed its own distinct legal system, yet shared foundations remain visible. History often builds layer upon layer rather than beginning anew. Now imagine entering a railway station. Perhaps it is Mumbai's Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj terminus. Perhaps Nairobi. Perhaps Kolkata. Perhaps somewhere in Sri Lanka. The trains arriving today are newer, faster, more comfortable. But many still travel along routes first surveyed during the 19th century. Those railways transformed economies, connected distant communities, moved crops, carried migrants, linked ports with inland cities. They also served imperial administration and commerce. Infrastructure can possess two truths simultaneously. It can benefit future generations. It can also have been built to serve unequal systems of power. History often refuses to fit neatly into simple categories of good or bad. Then there is language. The English language traveled farther than any British army. It crossed oceans inside merchant ships, mission schools, government offices, universities, printing presses. Today, English functions as one of the world's principal international languages. Scientists publish research in English. Pilots communicate in English. Diplomats negotiate in English. Students from dozens of nations often share English as their common language. Of course, this expansion also came at a cost. Many indigenous and local languages declined under colonial rule. Some disappeared entirely. Others survived through remarkable resilience. Today, communities across the former empire work to preserve and revive those languages, recognizing that every language carries a unique way of understanding the world. Walk through a cricket ground on a warm afternoon. Children play beneath enormous skies. Some wear shirts supporting India, others England, Australia, Pakistan, South Africa, New Zealand, the West Indies, Bangladesh. Spectators cheer every boundary. Someone argues passionately with the umpire's decision, as humans apparently have done since inventing competitive sports. Cricket arrived through empire. Today it belongs to the world. Perhaps that is one of history's quietest transformations. Things created by empires often outlive the empires themselves, and eventually, they cease belonging to any single nation. Food tells a similar story. Imagine strolling through modern London. You pass a bakery, then an Indian restaurant fragrant with cardamom and cumin, a Jamaican cafe serving jerk chicken, a Pakistani grocery, a Nigerian market, a Bangladeshi sweet shop. The aromas mingle in the evening air. For centuries, Britain carried goods from around the globe. Now those global cultures helped define Britain itself. Tea from India, sugar from the Caribbean, spices from South Asia, chocolate from West Africa, coffee from East Africa. Entire cuisines emerged from centuries of exchange, sometimes voluntary, sometimes shaped by conquest, migration, and commerce. History is often served quietly at the dinner table. Yet alongside these cultural connections remain difficult memories. Many museum collections continue prompting debate. Should artifacts collected during the imperial era remain in British museums? Or should they return to the countries from which they came? Consider the Benin bronzes, taken by British forces during the 1897 expedition against the Kingdom of Benin. Benin bronzes. Who owns history? Can historical injustice ever truly be repaired? Different museums and governments have reached different conclusions. Some objects have been returned. Others remain the subject of ongoing discussions. The conversation itself reminds us that the past is never entirely finished. There are also the borders. Some were drawn along rivers. Others followed mountains. Many followed rulers and communities that had existed for centuries. But others were drawn with rulers upon maps in distant offices. Straight lines crossing deserts. Boundaries dividing ethnic groups. Frontiers combining communities with very different histories. Not every modern conflict stems from colonial borders. History is rarely that simple. Yet in many regions, decisions made during the imperial era continue influencing politics today. A line drawn in ink can shape generations. The Commonwealth of Nations offers another kind of legacy. Commonwealth of Nations. Unlike the Empire, it is not based upon conquest or colonial administration. Its members are independent, sovereign nations that choose whether to belong. Some are republics. Others remain constitutional monarchies. Some were never part of the British Empire at all. The organization promotes cooperation in areas such as education, sport, diplomacy, and development. It reflects an interesting historical transformation. An empire once held together by authority became, in part, a voluntary association. Some see it as a valuable network. Others view it as a reminder of colonial history. Perhaps it is, in different ways, both. Now imagine standing upon a quiet hillside overlooking the English Channel. The wind carries the smell of salt water. Far below, ships continue their endless journeys. Container vessels replace East Indiamen. Aircraft cross the sky where once only seabirds flew. Satellites now connect continents that sailing ships once needed months to reach. The world has become smaller, faster, more connected. Yet the questions remain surprisingly familiar. How should powerful nations treat weaker ones? Can trade exist without exploitation? What responsibilities accompany global influence? How should history be remembered? Not celebrated uncritically, not condemned simplistically, but understood. Because understanding is different from approval, and remembering is different from glorifying. Perhaps that is the greatest lesson of the British Empire. It was neither a story of uninterrupted progress nor one of uninterrupted cruelty. It built railways and extracted wealth. It expanded education while denying political equality to many. It connected continents through trade while participating in systems of conquest, dispossession, and exploitation. It helped spread scientific knowledge. It also contributed to devastating famines, violent repression, and profound inequalities in many places. These truths do not cancel one another. They exist together. History often asks us to hold complexity without rushing toward easy conclusions. That is harder than choosing heroes or villains. But it is usually closer to the truth. As midnight settles over our imaginary journey, let us return to where we began. Picture once more a lone sailing ship leaving England more than 4 centuries ago. Its wooden hull creaks gently. Canvas sails billow beneath a cool Atlantic breeze. The sailors have no idea what lies beyond the horizon. They cannot imagine India under the British Raj. They cannot imagine Australia, Canada, or New Zealand as self-governing nations. They cannot imagine the abolition of slavery, the Industrial Revolution, 2 world wars, airplanes, radio, the internet, or an audience, centuries later, quietly listening to their story while preparing for sleep. History is like the tide. No empire can command it forever. Every kingdom rises. Every dynasty changes. Every flag eventually gives way to another. Yet humanity continues. Building. Remembering. Forgetting. Beginning again. And perhaps that is strangely comforting. Because the British Empire, despite all its power, ultimately proved subject to the same quiet law that governs every civilization. Nothing lasts forever. Not the mightiest fleet. Not the grandest palace. Not the largest empire ever drawn upon a map. Only time. Only memory. Only the stories we choose to tell. So, as the lanterns grow dim, the waves whisper against distant shores, and the last light fades from the old imperial map, let the centuries drift gently into silence. The ships have reached their harbor. The empire has become history, and tonight, you have walked its entire long road. Sleep well.